I thought
You're
you were
not late
late.
at all. I thought you were going to be late. Tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I've got some good news, I've got some bad news. The good news is, today we're starting something brand new and fresh, and it is probably the most valuable thing you will learn in this entire course. And it's something people don't often teach because there are many different ways of going about it. And oftentimes developers kind of gloss over it. It's like, oh, you don't need to learn that. You just have somebody else do that. Have the DBAs or somebody specializes in databases, but it's always somebody else. Being a full stack development shop, it's our problem. It's our thing. We have to build the entire application. So over 20 plus years of experience, we know full well about...
needs another sec. Sorry.
Okay, we'll record it. We know full well about how to build databases and how to work with them and how to tune them. Tune is a funny word. What do you tune in a database? A lot of times people will create their database wrong, or they'll create it subpar, and it kind of works, but it's like a car that they threw an extra carburetor in. It's like it kind of works, but when you hit shift between second and third gear, it fails sometimes. It's kind of like that. So we're going to get into, okay, how do you look at a database and intuitively, over the next 2 or 3 days, is that good or bad? And if it's bad, why is it bad? What can you do to make it better? What can you do to make it faster? And this is where a little bit of tact comes in, because the original creators of the database, you can't talk with them about their baby. So you come in and say, I'm going to make it a little bit faster. And one nice thing about databases is it's repeatable. It's you do your thing, and if you're right, 10 seconds later, it's proven. And there's no conversation. It's like, okay, what else can you teach me? If you didn't like JavaScript, HTML, CSS, if you didn't really enjoy coding as much as you thought, here's the good news. Forget it. Everything you've learned to date, reset your brain. This is day one right now, if you have no intention of being a developer. Because most of the people who know database technologies don't look or write a line of code, not one. I've met database administrators that don't know SQL, like don't know structured query language. That's their full-time job, but they don't know. I don't write SQL. That's your job. You're a developer.
Wow.
So if you didn't like coding, you didn't like the way it was working, you didn't like all these editors, you don't really like the operating system, I hope that's not the case. If that's the case, you're probably not going to come work with us. But you can have a very good technology career by doing nothing but databases. And usually these are two different camps of people. That's why I'm telling you, this is really day one if this is going to be your career. You can do nothing but databases, deal with data, and work with developers to do all the application stuff. Never look at another line of code, and you'll be just fine. And you'll make a very good salary, sometimes getting paid more than the developers. So let's get into it. I've got like 3 slides here. And then it's not going to be me teaching all this stuff. It is the thing I like most about technology. And you're going to be able to tell that pretty quickly. And I am going to interject. We've got our next instructor today, Derek Linkus. He's living around Raleigh, and he's going to introduce himself. But he's a frequent speaker over at RTP in the coding gatherings over there. He is an expert in database development, so he's going to take you through. But when I hear something that, here's another way to say that, or here's something that he missed that they really need to know, I'm excited about this stuff. This is what I love to do. When I first learned coding, I did it for like a year. And I asked Frank Gessner, which is another one of my mentors at RJ Reynolds. And I said, I'm good at coding. Why do I care about the database? And he said, think about it a minute, Ali. What application in the world, what code in the world can you think of that doesn't use data, that doesn't have a database behind it? And it's like, yeah, maybe a calculator that you didn't care about storing anything, but everything else, everything, in some way, shape, or form, they're having to save the data. You got to come back to it. So the point here, if you pay attention to nothing else in this entire 8 weeks, know databases, understand databases, because at the center of any application, the beating heart of any application, is the database. And I want to leave you with that thought. You can build a database, you can build the application, you can build the front end, you can rebuild the front end as a mobile app. You know kind of where those tiers are. If the application developers were horrible, they had no clue. They screwed things up royally. The application's failing right and left. But their database was all right. Say they had somebody else come in or they knew databases. And they built the database okay. It's not the end of the world. You can have another team of developers, throw all of the code away, every last bit of it, start from scratch, reuse the same database, and everything's going to be night and day, perfectly working as soon as they finish. Let's do the converse. You have a great application, but they inherited a legacy database written by somebody 30 years ago that didn't really know what they're doing, and the data is semi-corrupt. It's not clean. No matter how good the application is written, they are going to fail. I'll tell you that right now. Is that going to be easy to fix? No. They're in a world of hurt. Because to rebuild your database, you not only have to rebuild your structure, but you got to think about what about all the data in this crazy format? They've really, really hurt you. So what's most important in application development, and this is my own take, get the database right. Get your data clean. You can rebuild your application 10 times, retain the same database. And that's fine. If you get your database wrong, it doesn't matter how good your application is. So pay attention to this, this next few days. We're going to revisit it. So, slide 1. Does it build on the stuff we just learned? Well, let's take a look. So we started down at the bottom. We said, we're going to start down here. And we know what JSON is, JavaScript Object Notation. We've done some coding in the browser. We've got JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. We haven't talked about these things. We're going to talk about that when Paul Taylor comes in the last couple weeks. We've skipped over this. I did show you a little bit of Node.js. You know that's API voting thing. That's Node.js. And I've actually given you the repository. You can go take a peek at the code. You can try to do that yourself. We're going to do that in day 13. So we're going to revisit that. We're going to come back. We're going to start here today, SQL Server. And we're also going to cover PostgreSQL and MySQL. We'll cover a little bit of MongoDB on day 13. So we've jumped over the middle tier. So it's kind of disconnected. You've got the front end, jump over the middle tier, go to the back end. We're starting the back end because the back end determines the success or failure, in my opinion, of the entire application, so it's more important. Also, it's nice to give you a break. It's like you've been coding, you've been learning hard stuff and brand new concepts in coding. Let's completely shift gears. If we need to give that part of your brain a little bit of a rest. Now, we're going to work another part of your brain really, really hard starting today, but it's a different part. Is cramming all this stuff in my brain normal? No, it's not normal. It hurts a little bit, I know. The reason it's not normal is because there aren't a lot of full-stack developer shops that do this. There are very few. Full-stack developer shops are off doing projects, which is what we normally do. So it's not normal you're going to have a course like this. Boot camps, they're not going to try to teach you everything. They're going to teach you what they know they can teach you well in a certain amount of time, because their reputation is on the line. Our reputation is not on the line. We know we're extremely good developers. We're doing this because we want you. We want to train you so that we can bring you on and train you more. We don't care about a reputation for training. This isn't what we do. So we're not afraid to go hard. We're not afraid to push you, because as fast as you can run to keep up, that's really the goal. I want you to learn as fast as possible. And if you can't get 100%, get 99, get 80, get 70. Because at the end of this, the people that we extend offers to, we're going to help you go back for months and ask whatever questions. We're going to give you little side projects. It's going to be, we're going to help you along. We're just trying to see everybody in the class, because after this class is over, we can only extend the offer for Sightsource to a select few because we're not that big a company. The rest of you, I want you to have as much capability that we can expose you to. I don't want to hold anything back, because for those of you we can't hire, I want you to have the benefit of it. And afterwards, of course, you can send us emails or something, but it's not the same as being in the same classroom and asking us questions. So this is the area that I know best. If there's somebody in Sightsource, and it's always been like this, I know this best because I love it the best. This is what I enjoy. I used to, when I first came to Winston-Salem, Frank Gessner said, you know, this is why you should probably care about databases. And I took it to heart, and I looked into it, and I taught myself stuff, and it was really hard because I didn't have a whole lot of people willing to help me. And several months later, I found myself on the back deck. I was renting a house on Robin Hood Road with a couple other guys. And back there, and I had a piece of paper because I didn't have a laptop. And I would go out on the deck, and I would draw out databases. I would draw out, this box is a table, this box is a table, how do they connect? And it's like, no, scratch that out in pencil and pen. And I would take it to work, and I would code it into the computer the next day to see, oh, no, I didn't do that right. I'll have to remember that on the deck tomorrow. It's like, that was my crossword puzzle. That was my Sudoku. That's what I enjoyed doing, and I still enjoy it that much. I don't do it as often these days because a lot of the mystery is gone, but whenever I hear, like there was I'm not going to divulge the name of the startup company, but they were a winner of a recent competition over at Flywheel maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And I said, you know, I'm really interested in your idea. You want to have a little talk, and I'll tell you about what we can do? And I was kind of marketing Sightsource, but at the same time, I had an ulterior motive. I wanted to go think about their business plan and draw their database. That was my ulterior motive, and it had nothing to do with business. Sorry, Harper, I wasn't thinking about money. So they said, yeah, let's get together. So they booked an appointment. We got into a room at Flywheel, and one of the 2 co-founders was kind of semi-database literate. And I said, tell me your business plan. And they had a whiteboard, not a little play whiteboard, but like a real whiteboard on the wall. And I said, okay, let's build it. It's like, yeah, we're thinking it's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks at least to build a database. Yeah, you might be right. Let's talk about your business plan. And we had a 15-minute conversation, and we built their database on the board, not to the column level, but to the table level in about 10 minutes. And it's like, just draw it out. Erase that line. Here, and let's talk it through. Did that work? Yeah, it works. 10 minutes. That's the exciting, immediate gratification of databases. You know, if you build this, that application is going to work for 10 years or more. In 10 minutes, you can do that. It's just the skill of intuitively knowing, how do I build my normalized databases? How do I put the tables together? Relate that to a business plan. And you can't learn that out of a book. There are lots of books written about third normal form and E.F. Codd in 1970 coming up with mathematical theory about relational databases. Throw all that out the window. At the end of the day, it's a business owner saying, this is what I want my business to do, and I need somebody who understands databases to build it for me. And you need to understand, when you hear user, is that a table or is that 2 tables? When you hear venue, is that 1 or 2 tables? And it's questions, it's dialogue. You have to ask the business questions. And we're going to get to that. That's the exciting part, and that's the interesting part. So it's not normal. It's because this is a rare course. And this is a rare course because other organizations putting this on care about how well they do with the participants. They care about not hurting you. They care about your physical and emotional well-being. And yeah, you've probably intuited, we care about you, but we care more about you understanding it. So we care about your physical and emotional well-being, but not as much as others.
Thanks, Dad.
I just want to see if we can live in a steamroller.
Take your medicine. This is good for you. So the answer is, can we forget all of that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? The answer is, if you don't want to be a developer, if you want to be a database administrator or a database developer that does SQL, yeah, you can forget all of that. So if you feel a little bit down, it's like, you know, I may not be a very good developer. This isn't going how I thought. I don't think that's a valid point, and I think you're prejudging, and I think you should give yourself a break personally. But if you want to run with that, fine. You can have a very good technology career doing nothing but databases. Is this important? Yeah, it's important. And this is why it's important. Anybody know what this is?
It's a graph. Did someone say it's a graph?
In his hand.
Yeah, I'm holding it. Yeah, I'll look at the screen. So. Anybody tell me what this thing is? And Harper's got something very similar. I told him to bring it today just in case.
That's a raspberry.
It's similar. This is a knockoff from China. This one's $3 cheaper. This is called an orange pie. You can just pass it around. Yeah, it's obviously a knockoff, orange pie. So the Raspberry Pi is a very small computer. Very small computer, and a Pi 0W, one of the models that Raspberry Pi came out with, costs $10, and it has wireless capability. It runs a full Linux stack, which means you can write code for it. It has wireless capability. So you could run, and you can run, with Node.js, the web server we're going to talk about. You can build your own Node.js app, put it there, and have your own Apple TV equivalent or a video library. You could write your own apps that are stored there. All you need is a plug to give it some power. That's it. For $10 and knowledge, you can write a database that runs on there. Oh, by the way, as you pass it around, there's a little SD card. That SD card is its hard disk. You just plug it in. That's its hard disk underneath. Yeah, it's got wireless, a hard disk, it's got a CPU, it's got RAM, it's got everything there. So, why does that matter in the context of data? Why are we having props today? We're having props today, well, number one, here's another thing that you're not going to get in another boot camp. We write code for that. We write Elixir for that. So if you come to work with us, you're going to learn Elixir, and you're going to write code, either JavaScript, Node.js, or Elixir, and you're going to write code for the Raspberry Pi, not the Orange Pi. I have this because, we were trying to save a couple dollars and see if we could mass produce on the Orange versus the Raspberry. These run a little bit hot, and they're not quite as stable, so no. The answer is no. But the form factor is very similar, and the concept is the same. And I didn't have a Raspberry because we have them all deployed.
What are y'all making with the Raspberry Pi?
We're doing monitoring, and I'm not going to tell you specifically the business plan, but we're monitoring an industrial device, reading temperature, pressure, and ambient information, and collecting that locally and communicating to a web application, and collecting that into a web application and selling that as a software as a service to the industry. I didn't hear it. No. As a matter of fact, Mudit right now is writing an application that does Bluetooth communication directly to the Pi. And it communicates back and forth to change its wireless so it can communicate with the web app. Well, lots of cool stuff. We haven't covered, and we're not going to cover everything in this class that you can do that we do. But here's a side pitch for, you're about to be inundated with offers, because now people realize, oh, this Empower thing's real. These people are actually learning how to code. We need to start thinking about, yeah, we need developers. Y'all are going to start to have some very interesting conversations with the people interested in your skills, the skills that you're still developing. I would advise you not to overpromise just yet. Give yourself 2 or 3 weeks. Don't start working on one of their things just yet. Let it settle, and then decide what you want to do. Because now, the tables are turning. You're going to have some skills. You don't have to sell out early. So, listen to their offers, talk with them, about business owners. Tomorrow we're going to go to Flywheel. We're going to talk with small businesses that are very interested in your skills because they want you to build applications for them. So, getting back to why does that Raspberry Pi that's going around, why does that Orange Pi going around matter? Because the data in the world up to about 5-10 years ago, where the rate of growth of data was driven by how fast can people type, because data was collected by people. And people are animals. We're just big plotting animals. And we're walking around typing on the keyboard. How fast can we type on the keyboard? Not very fast. Now we've got machines collecting data. Machines do things an order of magnitude faster than we do. That little Raspberry Pi, this chart here shows the growth of those devices in the market. What you have now are not people storing data into databases. Machines storing data into databases. The growth of data is now exponential. And it's hard for humans to understand exponential growth. But it was hard enough to query a database and get things aggregated 10 years ago. It's going to become so much more difficult because there's more of it now. So, why does data and data technologies matter? There's the saying, data is the new oil. Data is where the value is. And it's true. But making sense of it requires people with technology skills. There's no magic silver bullet. Nobody's going to come up with a technology that eliminates the need for people to understand how to talk with databases. It's not going to happen. So what does that mean for you in your career? Even if you're a developer, you need to be able to talk to the database. Even if you don't like what we're about to cover, you need to talk with the DBA. You need to talk with the concepts. You need to understand what relational design's about. So this kind of is a good switching point. If you really liked the JavaScript, CSS, HTML, you're going to love the C#, and you're going to love the other stuff we're going to cover, Elixir stuff. If you didn't like it, okay, you're about to find something that maybe you will like. You don't have to like both of these. In the real world, outside of Sightsource and outside of full-stack developer shops, developers are usually one or the other. So don't worry if you don't like it all. If you do like it all, I want to talk with you. This is why the growth is not going to stop. Look at the social media, voice over IP, and enterprise data, sensors and devices. Y'all heard the buzzword IoT, Internet of Things. It's driven by that little device and others like it. All it is computers collecting data with sensors. You know, you can have a $3 infrared sensor that you can plug in, and I bought it like a year ago. I haven't had time to play with it. You can plug it in, and it will sense like 100 meters away if anything passes its path, light or dark, for $3. And all you have to do is like 2 lines of code to detect it. Then it's like, what do you do with that? Okay, I've got an $8 computer, that's $8 by the way, plus $3, okay? And I'm going to write a little bit of code, and I'm going to plug it in, and I can do almost anything in the world. Ambient temperature sensor. This is like building web pages in 1996. When nobody knew it was out there, it's that cheap. You have the power if you can write code and get an $11 computer up and running. Have lunch or buy a computer and build an app. Okay?
Won't that allow me to work from the beach? That's probably what's important there.
The question was, won't that allow me to work from the beach? Yes, you can do anything you want. You can have remote SSH capability. That's wireless capable. Yeah. Okay, so let's give a little quick overview. And I know Derek is starting to sweat because I'm encroaching on his time, and he's packed it full of all this technology, the specifics. I'm just kind of giving the introduction and show you why you should care. So will you like it? Let's see. Are you impatient and enjoy immediate gratification? Yes. That's me. That's why I love it. It's like, okay, tell me if I'm right or not, and if I'm not right, I'll fix it. That's, give it to me now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to have to load my browser and wait 3 seconds for it to load and refresh. No, I'm too impatient. I want to press F5 and tell me yes or no. That's what this is. There's only one editor. You get confused with Atom or Sublime or EM Editor or Notepad. Forget it all. There's only one. One per database. Set logic. So remember in math, probably, was it 6th grade, 7th grade, they taught you about Venn diagrams where separate and they overlap a little bit. That is what you need to think about. So shift gears in your head. We're not talking row at a time like code. Like call this function, you jump there. Not at all. Throw that out for the next week. You'll get back to it in C#. Now you're thinking about, I've got 10 items and I've got 5 items. And I'm going to see what the overlap is. Think Venn diagrams. Think of sets. That's how you need to put your mind in order. You can have not just 2, but 3. So this is the intersection of A, B, and C. Okay? You're going to get into the syntax. This is just high level. This is what you need to think about. Don't think row at a time. Oh. Y'all know what Stack Overflow is? Mm-hmm. Okay. Stack Overflow is just a developer question and answer forum. These days, if I have any time, and I don't have a lot of time, instead of going back on the back deck and drawing out databases, I'll go out here and just for fun, I'll answer some SQL questions. Just like, okay, yeah, try this. And it's interesting. It's like, okay, here's their problem. Organize their problem. Builds a little table, build a little use case, write a query, and it's like, here's your answer. And I don't do it for them. I do it because I like the stuff. So, and they get the benefit. But if you want to practice, not just for SQL, but if you want to practice for JavaScript, HTML, CSS, there are questions of all types of technology out here. Go out there and search. Try to help somebody. Ask your own questions. See what they say. It is public, so not everybody's going to be very nice, but such is life. Okay, I wanted to put this back here, and the only change, I copied this from the first day. And I don't think you all took it to heart the first day. You should now. Remember, Reminder, we are going to expose you to 20 plus years of software development experience. You're not going to get it. You didn't believe me, did you? Now you should believe me. You're going to get most of it. And you remember more than you think you do. If you wake up in the morning, it's like, okay, how do you say class in CSS? Tell me, what's a class in CSS? It's one character. It's a dot. It's a period. You know more than you think you do. So do your best, absorb, don't stress, ask for help. We're here. Okay? Take advantage of us. We're here now. We're not going to be here 3 months from now when you're struggling and you're trying to get this on your own. Ask us while we're here. Enjoy the ride. This specifically, for the next few days, I wish I were in your seat because this is a lot of fun. So, without any further ado, I'm going to stop the feed, Richmond, and Derek, if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll get started properly.
Should be. All right. Let me give Oh yeah, if you would. Yeah, he's gonna get you on a different wireless network, like the non-public one that's a little bit faster streaming, and just minimize that, and then I'll give him like a 2-minute warning whenever, and just give me the signal when you're ready.
Not Blackboard, you know, through their email, you can log on to through your VCU IP, log on to their computers and they will not $10,000 for another few months.
I'm pretty much ready when they are. I'm pretty much ready whenever.
Okay, I'll give you the.
Should we open Excel or something like that? Should we open Excel or are we just going to watch you?
You're just going to watch me in the beginning.
Cool.
I had a pretty long lecture portion, but he stole my thunder, so it's going to be real short. We're going to dive right in.
Good.
That's what you prefer?
Yeah.
We'll be doing it quickly.
Do you have any military motivational YouTube videos we could watch?
Military?
Yeah. Get us.
Oh
well. Databases.
I do speaking at Fort Bragg about once a month, but it's just chatting about being a developer.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. I usually don't do tech stuff when I do that. They just sort of ask basic questions. What's it like? So I don't actually show. Ready to go? All right. Yeah, so thank you, Ali. Everything he said, I agree with. I agree with that 100%. I'll be touching on a couple things he said. I'll be reiterating them, things that I think are important. But thank you, Ali, for introducing me. My name's Derek Linkus. I've been doing software for years, I don't know, a couple decades approximately. Generally on the Microsoft stack. So we're going to be talking about SQL Server, which is the main database server for Microsoft. And I'll also be doing this stuff, the chats on C# starting next week. So that's my two things. Ali pretty much covered a lot of what I was going to open with. So I'm going to touch on a couple things. You don't need to follow along, you can just watch right now. But in just a few minutes, we'll be diving right in. But I want to start with something that you may have already used, and that's Excel, Microsoft Excel, or some competitor to Excel. There's an open source project that's a competitor of it. Who in here in Richmond has used Excel? Right, most people have. Great, wonderful. So Excel's pretty easy, and it's part of the Office suite. There are many spreadsheet softwares out there. Google Docs has a spreadsheet, same sort of thing. This is sort of the way I like to introduce it to people. We need in software, as Ali was pointing out, somewhere to put all the data. Right? We have logic, we know how to do math, we know how to do algorithms. You learn about that in JavaScript, but we talk about that in C#. You also see in other languages. We need somewhere to store the data. We could store it in text files, and the whole world could be one giant text file, but what you would learn very quickly is that'd be very inefficient. So we need other ways to store data, and I'll use Excel sort of as a guide just for visualization. You can think of Excel, if you open it like I've opened it right here, starts with one sheet. I could have columns, so I could have name and address, maybe age. You don't need to follow for this, I'm just sort of giving an example. And you could put this in this sheet. You could go to a different sheet if you wanted to. You could store different kinds of information. So we might have like a product name, a price, and other information. So you have all of these tables. So you could put quite a bit of data in a spreadsheet. That would be superior to a text file, right? Because it's got functions in it. So you can do functions like equals A plus B So it's now just doing simple addition. So if I put in 2 and 5, it would count up to 7. So it's got a little bit of logic in it. It obviously is visually lines up things for you. You can have different data types and columns, that sort of thing. So spreadsheets work to store a little bit more data than you might store in, say, a text file. But as Ali was pointing out, in real products, we're not talking about, you know, a byte of data or 100 bytes or a million or a billion. I don't know if you noticed, it said volume in exabytes on the side. I believe exa is above petabyte.
Yeah.
So it's megabyte, gigabyte, terabyte, petabyte, exabyte. All of those are scales, 3 scales of magnitude, so times 1,000. Right? At that point, you could not imagine a spreadsheet with 100 trillion rows in it. In fact, Excel's not built for that. It wouldn't work. It would just crash. It's not built for that. So what do we need? We need real database softwares. And we generally store them, and that's why I wanted to show this, in this sort of visual. You can sort of think each sheet is sort of an independent set of columns and rows, and at those intersections are cells, and that's where the data goes. So we can have, my first sheet was a better example, name, address, and age. So we could have Bob and Alice. I'm not going to fill it out, but we could have the address and age for those individuals. Our database is going to do the same thing. There are lots of different kinds of databases out there. I'm not going to talk about those categories. We're going to talk about SQL Server. SQL Server is a relational database. Emphasis on the word relational. Be sure to memorize that. There are other types out there. There are pros and cons to these different types, but all we're going to talk about for these, it'd actually be 3 days, is SQL Server, a specific product, and it's relational. And I'll get into what relational means later. Okay? But just sort of start with this visualization, and then we're going to go right into SQL Server, and you'll see how we build tables. Tables are roughly going to be sheets. All right? And let me check my notes. Every now and then I'll be checking my notes, make sure I don't miss anything that I wanted to tell everybody. Sheet to table, strictness of types. Nope, we're good. So we can actually dive right into the fun part. I'm going to do a lot, as I'm doing these presentations, I'm going to be doing a lot of what I call follow along, which is me on my keyboard typing stuff, and you're just going to type the exact same thing. But then we'll be breaking out, and I'll give you some exercises. You'll type a little bit more creatively, something you want to type. But I'm going to close Excel because we don't need that anymore. And everybody, it's time to do follow along. So go ahead and open up SQL Server Management Studio. Harper's told me everybody should have that installed. Please get that open. It looks like this when you open it, roughly. It won't be identical. Your desktop name might be different than mine. But when you first open it, you will get a dialog. Hopefully the default option here will work for you. If not, Harper, please help them out.
Hey Derek, where would they find SQL Server Management Studio?
So I have it on my hotbar. If you're in Windows 10 or I think even 8, you could search. And I bet if I type SQL, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, big long name. You can see the icon. Our icons, by the way, it's very common for databases to look like a cylinder. So if you see database diagrams on whiteboards, people often show databases as cylinders. And that's because we used to have rotating hard drives and they were stacks of cylinders, so it made sense. That actually has stopped making sense, but we're going to keep the icon forever probably. So it's a cylinder. So get that open, and does anybody here in Richmond not have that open yet?
It's loading.
It's loading right now? Okay, great. So while it's loading for everybody, I'll talk about what it is. So one thing I want you to really grasp about SQL Server that I didn't grasp when I was first shown it, and I really wish somebody would have told me. Think of it this way: when you can install SQL Server on a server and have no user interface for it. So usually production servers just have that's installed. You cannot actually access on that server. If you go into that server, it doesn't even have SQL Server Management Studio. But it's got the full functional database software running on it, and it's saving users' data. Totally separate from that is this product. This product, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. I will sometimes abbreviate it SSMS or Management Studio, so be ready for those synonyms. It's just shorter than saying Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. That's a lot of syllables. So SSMS. That's just a user interface. You can connect to multiple web servers and administer them. You can do pretty much anything with it. So I just want to distinguish that this software running that I have on the screen right now is just a way to look at the server. The server is actually buried underneath, and you can't see it really directly. It's important to know that because you can actually install SQL Server Management Studio on a laptop and connect to a SQL Server installed very far away. In fact, as a developer, a professional DBA, you'll be doing that the majority of the time. You won't have the customer's data on your little bitty laptop, that'll be elsewhere, and you'll just use SQL Server Management Studio, as its name suggests, to manage that SQL Server. Okay? So it's time for some follow along. So if you open it, by default when you have it installed, I've cleaned mine up here. You won't actually have any databases other than these two other folders. But we're going to create our first database. We're going to do that right now. So all you got to do, you can go to Databases, right click and do New Database. Now there's a lot of stuff on the screen. We're going to ignore all of it except the text box where the cursor is. Go ahead and type any name you want. I'm going to be creating lots of databases in front of you, so I'm going to be using the native phonetic alphabet. I'm just going to call mine Alpha. You can do the same if you want, but you're going to see me create a lot of them in front of you. So there's no real meaning to that word. I just starting with the letter A. Now once you've done that, you can pat yourself on the back. You've created your first database and you can go home. Kidding about that last part. You cannot go home yet. But you have created your first database. So what you've effectively done is it's similar to creating a new workbook with Excel. Right? It actually starts with one sheet by default. By default, ours has no tables in it. We can confirm that by clicking on this little plus. A lot of folders here, but the second one says tables. If you expand it, it expands to folders, but there's actually no tables there. Okay? So when you create that new database, there's a little bit of magic happening under the hood. It does create files, sort of stubs those out, some database specific files, but we don't need to look at those. They're buried somewhere on my local hard drive, but this database is completely created right now. There's no save button that we're going to be clicking, so it's live all the time, pretty much. Database naming, reviewed tables, tables folder. Okay, so the first thing we're going to create our first table. All right. We create tables anytime we need to store data, obviously. The way SQL Server works and the way most of these relational databases work is you create a table for something like customers or products or widgets where there's going to be some unknown quantity of rows in the production product, but all those rows follow a similar what we call schema, which basically is a fancy term for meaning they all have the same columns. So you might have two different customers, one's named Bob, one's named Alice, one age is 20, the other age is 21. Obviously those are similar kinds of things. That would go in one single table. We would call those users or customers. But let's create a new table. So you right click on table and the first option is table. And we're going to get this designer. The designer makes building tables really easy. It's popped up here on the right, and it's already put the cursor right there for that first column that we want. Let's go ahead and just call this first name. Different organizations you work at are going to have different naming schemes, by the way. Be ready, wherever you go, to fall into whatever their naming scheme is for consistency. Just be ready for that. Some would call this first name. I've capitalized F and N. Some places only want the first letter capitalized. Some want all except the first letter capitalized. Some would call it name first. Just be ready that it varies from company to company, and they're usually pretty strict about that, so be ready. I'm just going to call it first name. And I'm going to, so whenever we define a column, it does have three properties by itself. It's going to have a column name, which I'm calling first name, a data type, which I'll get back to in a second, and whether or not it allows nulls, meaning if the data is actually optional. So can you leave it blank effectively? So if you drop down the data type, I just want you to drop it down and sort of scroll up and down and just look at all these types that are available. So if you were storing data in a text file, they would all be strings, what we generally call as developer strings. In SQL Server, that would be varchar, which starts with the V down here at the bottom, one of these two varchars. Your instinct often when you're a new developer, what I've seen in a lot of new developers and new DBAs, is to make everything a string. It's very human. Strings are very human. They read very well. They're typed with letters in our own languages, English or whatever your language is. They feel kind of comfortable, but strings have a lot of problems. I'm not going to enumerate all of them. From the point of view of a DBA, strings are fat. They're very large data types. They're flexible in size and generally take up a huge amount of data on the database in the file system for what they store. So when you look at this list, you're going to go, gosh, that seems like a very long list. And the reason is we want to pick really efficient data types. You'll be able to pack a lot more data in if you pick an appropriate data type. We'll be picking different types as we go forward over the next couple days. But first name is a string. So I'm just going to choose I'll just choose varchar 50. I got to click on it correctly. Hold on. There we go. Varchar 50. So varchar, what does that mean? It just means variable length, character string, and in parentheses is the maximum length of the string. So 50 characters. So if you have anybody's first name who's over 50, it won't fit in here. But we're going to assume everybody in the world has a first name less than 50 characters. I'm going to uncheck allow nulls. That way it's required. We'll come back to nulls a little bit later. It just basically means optional. I'm going to do a last name as well. So please do a last name. You'll notice you can type the data type. You don't have to pick it from the list. For me, I'm used to this, so I can type sometimes quicker than I can click with the mouse. And I'm going to go ahead and put age. How about that? And that's the only reason I'm picking age. I want to show you a data type other than a string. So I'm going to make that an int, int integer. So I think you guys have been doing JavaScript. So JavaScript does have types. These are a little bit more strict. So if I make this an integer, and then later on the developer, which might be you or a teammate, tries to insert the word zebra into the age column, SQL Server will reject that. It'll throw an error. It will not put the row in, and there's usually a red message somewhere very close by that doesn't like that. But we're just going to keep these 3 columns first off, and then at the top here, there's a little save button. I'm going to sort of wave my mouse around it here. Go ahead and click that. You're going to get a prompt. It's going to want a table name. I'm going to call that customers. Oops. I'm going to spell it correctly. There we go. So we've created our first table. This is just like creating a new sheet in Excel and giving it 3 columns. It's very similar to that. You can just use that as an analogy. I'm going to close this. I just clicked the little X at the top of its bar just to get it off the screen. SSMS has one attribute, I'll call it, that it's had forever, and that is this part on the left doesn't update. Okay, so you got to right click on tables and do refresh, and if you do that, you'll see your new table right there at the bottom. Now it starts with DBO dot. We'll talk about what that DBO means later. You can just ignore it. It's not going to be important at the beginning here. So we have a new table, and it's obviously empty. For fun, let's go ahead and expand that and look at the columns. And I'm gonna drag this a little bit so we can see it. There we go. I'm gonna go a little bit further. You can see I can actually visualize its schema with that little drop down. There are other folders here we'll talk about later over the next couple days. But you can see, just like creating a spreadsheet, we got those columns. It's ready for data. All right. Any questions so far? Everybody up to speed? Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Is naming things like it was earlier where you can't have spaces?
The question is, can we put spaces in the names? No, I'm going to say no. Technically you can. There are special characters you can use to escape spaced names, spaced columns and spaced table names. You can use square brackets. I'm going to try not to show that. So it's technically possible. Let's not do that.
It's like file spaces and file names,
Yeah.
so you can do it, but it tends to break stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and my personal experience, totally anecdotal, has been on the job, my teammates would frown at that if I did that.
Yeah.
So it's possible but bad form. Not everybody agrees with that, but I don't put spaces in. I've never had anybody complain that I didn't have spaces, but I have had people complain I had them. So I opt on not having spaces. And that's just, getting along with teammates. Different companies have different styles. So we've created the table, but now we're going to work with it. We need to work with the data inside of it. So I'm going to right-click, I think I have to right-click on the actual database. I'm going to leave my mouse there. There's an option there, New Query. Go ahead and click New Query. Okay, I want you to get really used to this blank canvas on the right. We're going to be spending a lot of time in here. One of the things that's kind of cool about SQL Server is everything is actually you can call it a query, some people call them scripts. Everything is actually completely script driven. Although we just built a table with a designer, I could have done that with a script. And in fact, on the job, as you get more advanced, you'll end up doing everything with scripts. You can actually completely administer an entire database never using SSMS. But that's a little bit advanced. It's kind of hard to imagine when you're learning, so we're going to use the designer a lot, but we're definitely going to be using a whole lot of queries, mostly for data manipulation. So when you open up this this window, you can see the top left. Then I want you to sort of focus on this drop-down, alpha. I could tell you, after using SSMS for a long time, sometimes this drop-down has the wrong database in it. So always be double-checking it. We're using the alpha database. It currently says alpha. It's correct. If you drop it down, you're actually going to see some of the system databases. There are ways to open queries by right-clicking on different places in the UI that will open and target something other than you expected. And that'll give you a lot of headaches because you'll be controlling a database but not the one you want. So you'll be adding tables and data and it'll be all in the wrong place. So it's in alpha and we got this blank canvas. So what are we going to do? We'll follow along with me. I'm going to show you we're going to write our first query ever. I have a style that I write where I capitalize all the keywords that appear in blue. You don't have to do that, but you're going to see me do that often. We're going to do select space, that's an asterisk, so it's shift 8, but I'm going to be calling it star, that's less syllables. And on a new line, I'm going to do from customers. So just type that exactly as I have, and I'm going to re-point out, you don't have to capitalize the blue ones, that's just the form I follow. A lot of people on the internet follow that, so that's how I write. I also didn't have to press enter. The white space is pretty much ignored by SQL. This would have been just as successful, not having it. But you will see all developers come up with a style. Mine's influenced by most of the teams I've worked on. So I usually put the blue words on new lines. It's generally my style. And is that what Sightsource likes to do?
I mean, I like that style too. Because
Harper likes it.
It helps you. It's like I'm doing a select here. I'm doing different keywords on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is 2 lines, so it looks pretty simple. Harper has probably, Ali as well, probably worked on ones that have thousands of lines, so it can get really overwhelming. So once you type that, you can actually either click this execute, but you're going to see me through these 3 days we're going to be working together. I'm going to press F5. That's my habit. F5 runs it. And it runs it. So what did we just do? Well, there are effectively 4 things you can do with data. And you're going to hear this your whole career, so get ready for this one. We often call it CRUD, all capital. A lot of developers just call it CRUD or CRUDing the database, CRUD, CRUD, CRUD. You'll hear that. Sounds like a dirty word, but it's just an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. Those are the 4 things you can do. You're either going to be adding records to a database, you're going to be reading those records, you'll be modifying existing ones, or deleting existing ones. Now, there's a lot of complex ways to decide which ones you're doing those 4 actions to, but those are the 4 actions. The select keyword in ANSI SQL, and we're using Transact SQL here for SQL Server, is the reading. And so what did we say? This says read every column from the customers table. That's what that first query does. So when we pressed F5, it ran successfully. It found our customers table. You can see it gives us the results at the bottom. You can see our 3 columns as we expected. However, this is kind of boring. There's no data in it yet. Right? So we're gonna put in some data. So we're gonna immediately type our second kind of CRUD, which is insert. And it's actually insert into. Now this is where we're creating a new record. You type the table name. And I think it's values. It's been actually a long time since I've typed this. Values, open paren, we're going to do some first names. So I'm going to do Bob Smith. And you can type any values you want. It won't be critical what you type here. You can use your own names if you want. And for an age, I'll do 20. Now I'm not going to press any of the hotkeys right yet. I'm just going to talk about what I typed. So insert, we're about to create a new record. We're going to target the customers table. The values we're going to supply are the first name, last name, and age. You'll notice with the strings in SQL, I've used single quotes. And SSMS colors those red for me, so that's a string. It's very similar to a string you would have used in JavaScript with either double quotes, single quotes, potentially even other characters. The age, however, I did not have to do that. SQL would have actually allowed me to do a string. It's generally, though, bad form. People usually complain. It's an actual number, 20, so we're going to do 20. Now, there's a couple things. When I press F5 here, what's interesting is it's going to run both of these statements in sequence. So it's actually going to reselect the customers, give me an empty record set, and insert one. As a tip, and this is just optional, just to throw it out there, you can select in this window, as I've done here. I did a shift to do this select. And if I press F5 right now, it runs only the part that I've selected. Feel free to do that, but I don't want to do any magic in front of you. I'm just going to press F5 with nothing selected. And it's going to do both. Now the record set looks empty because I first selected it, so it was empty. Then I inserted something. So with just the select highlighted, I'll do F5, and there's my first customer. And you should see that as well. All right, we've inserted the first customer. It's got a first name, last name, and an age. And in fact, we'll add another one. I'm just going to go in here and change this. You'll notice, by the way, once we run it, the query's finished. It's not active in any way. It's not alive. It's not saving anything. Like, it's not something that you could close and delete data with. Once we execute a query against the database, it gets fully executed, or it throws an error. One of the two things is true. So I'm going to do this highlighting. I'm going to insert Alice. I'm going to change the age for Alice. You'll notice if I just selected, it says one row is affected because I inserted. I can reselect star from customers, and I'll have both of them. Questions so far? And if there are any questions for Mrs. Salem, you tell me. Okay, great. Cool. So we got that. I'm going to put, just for fun, I'm going to put in one more customer because with a slightly different age. Because I'm going to show you some other queries we can do. So once again, we insert a new customer. I'm highlighting select star. Now we have 3 customers. Now 3 is not very impressive, but you have to appreciate you're using SQL Server. I could probably write a script here that could insert 1,000,000 records pretty quickly. And it would store it very efficiently on the hard drive. These systems are designed to be really efficient. It's really impressive how well they work. So, I've showed you select star. I find that that's always the best way to show people how to read data out of a database. However, the star is generally frowned upon. Select star means all columns. A lot of databases you might work on have lots of columns, maybe 100, 200 columns. And if you only need 2 or 3 of them, it's considered bad form to pull them all out of the database and stream those across a network connection into your application, because you pull a lot of data. So although I showed you star, and I will show you a little bit more, be ready on the job to not type star very much. Right now we're not writing an app, we're just playing, so it's pretty safe. But I'm going to show you that select star, that star meant every single column available. But now we're going to change that. So we're going to change it to first name, comma, last name. So that's our new select statement. Select first name, comma, last name. So it's a comma separated list of all the columns you want to bring back from the customers table. If I press F5 on this, you'll want to watch the results. You see how it has an age column? I'm going to press F5. No more age. So it's going to be important often. I'm only going to, when you're writing your application, you're just going to want some of the data out. As I said, the star is really usually bad form. It performs badly. It grabs too much data. That's generally the idea. Alright, so I'm going to remove this insert just to get it off the screen so it's not noise. I'm going to talk about some of the other functions that are available. So in SQL Server, it has a lot of built-in functions. Alright, things for manipulating strings, especially there's a whole bunch of those manipulating dates, things of that nature. So I'm just going to, I have a short list here, and we're just going to go through and review a couple of them. Let's do length. That's a good one. You'll notice all I did was add a comma, and I'm using len. You'll see SSMS made it, I guess that's a pink color, sort of a fuchsia. I'll call it pink. And in parentheses, I put the actual name of a column. What I'm asking it to do is give me the length of the record right there. And I'm going to press F5. You'll notice my record set has 3 rows in it now. So Bob's first name is 3 characters long. Alice's is 5, and Charlie's is 7. Right, pretty simple. We can get the length of a string. What else can we do? Some average top in between. Let's do substring. You'll notice, by the way, when I press the open paren, and I still use this, even though I use SSMS quite often, it gives you a little pop-up. It's kind of nice. It'll tell you exactly how to use it. So we're going to do a substring of first name. It wants expression, start position, and length. So we'll leave first name in there. We'll start at position 0, and we'll use it 2. And let's just see what that does. There we go. Position 1, excuse me. Once again, and you're going to, I'll make a comment on this. As a developer, we have some jokes often. We talk about being off by 1 or off by 1 errors. So many things are 0-based, some things are 1-based. Different languages do it differently. Sometimes your start indexes are not what you expected. But here, I have a substring on first name starting at position 1 and a length of 2. So you can see when I press F5, I get the first 2 letters of everybody's name. So there's a substring feature. All right? And I could have started elsewhere. I could start 1 ahead, so this will give me the second and third characters. So I've changed it to 2, 2. I get Ob, Lee, and Ha, just for fun. So there's lots of those methods in there. Let's see if I can look at my list here. Let's do, yeah, definitely one of the more popular ones. Some of them don't take any parameters. Let's do get date, open paren, close paren, so it takes no parameters. Press F5, what do we see? We see the third column, once again, with no name, but it has the current date in it. And it's actually looks like it's to the millisecond, which is nice. So it's just a function you can call to get the current date. I believe there's also a UTC version. Is that correct? Yes, there is. This gets the universal time, effectively Greenwich Mean Time. Depending on the project you're on, they might want local dates or they might want UTC time. Both are available in SQL Server. There's some date manipulation ones. We won't talk about those. Those are not too much fun to talk about. Oh, yes, question?
Is that the date right now or the date that they put the stuff in the table?
Great question. The question is the date right now or is that the current date or what was
When they put it in the table.
when they put it in the table? So the answer is that's when it was put in the table. So as this is, sorry, no, I apologize. Because we're doing a select, it's now. It's always now. So the best way to test this is keep pressing F5. So you see it says 13, 29, 12, 13, 29, 15, 13, 29, 18. So a few seconds are passing. I know I'm hitting it a lot, but it's currently the now. So because the select statement's being run at the moment I press F5, the get UTC date is being run right then. So that is the current date. Yeah, good question, and I almost answered it backwards. I thought we were doing updates. Yes, Harper?
Could you use get UTC date and like store it, like put it in your insert if you had a date field, and that way it would act like it was a timestamp of the thing?
Yes, we sure could, and I will do that. We'll do that in just a little bit. I have that in a future note here. So let's do a little bit. Let's talk about top. So I'm going to remove that. We're back to just the 3 names. So something else we can do. We can select the top records. So I'm going to do top and put the number 1 in parentheses. This just gets us the first record. This will sometimes be useful. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes it will. That one's pretty straightforward. I'll change the top 2 just so you can see that it works for any number we want. It's totally legal to put in a number that's too big. So if you do top 5, that's fine. It just gives you the 3. You're just putting a cap on how many you get back. There'll be plenty of cases where you just need the first record that meets some criteria, and that'll be good enough. All right, let's do probably one of the most common ways, one of the most common things you do with a select statement. The way we have it written now, it gets all records. And one of the most common things you'll do is filter those records down to a smaller set. Okay? So I am going to change it to select star, just because I want you to be able to see all the records. We're going to type where at the end of it. I'm going to do last name equals Smith. So all the where is doing is filtering for us. So we're basically once again saying, give me all the columns in the customer's database where the last name is Smith. Now we press F5, we get the same 3 records. That's not really impressive. But I can change that to age is greater than, so we'll do inequality, 21. And Bob will be left out. So there's a lot of inequalities. There's equality operators, there's some null checkers. There's plenty of ways to do wheres. You can do multiple where clauses. So you can just put or I should say multiple predicates in a single where clause. That's the correct terminology. First name. I'll introduce like. That'll be fine. Boom. So we've already constrain the group to ages over 21, which gave us 2 records, but this and says, and the first name starts with A. So like is another operator. It's kind of like the equals. You know how you can type the equals, or in this case we did a greater than, which I'll highlight. I can use like as an operator and say like and give it a comparison string. And in this case, the percentage sign, which is probably weirding you out, is the wild card. So we're saying anything that begins with A, show us that. So since we've limited it by age and first name, we just get the 1 record. Now some of you probably realize that there are no other names that start with A, so I could take off the age here and get the same record set. But and that's true, but I just wanted to show how to do multiple predicates in a single where clause. I also want to point out that if I change it to lowercase a, it still works. This is something that a lot of people don't really appreciate about SQL Server. It's just by default, and they call it collation. That's the technical word, but it's case insensitive. It ignores trailing white space. You might want to make a note of that because it might get you one day. Sometimes, like when we go to talk about C# strings are case sensitive. So capital A and lowercase a are considered different. But here, by default in SQL, it's case insensitive. Be ready to make a note of that when you're doing string comparisons. It's a very case insensitive system. There are options to change that, but very few companies take advantage of that. You'll generally be working with case insensitive filters. Questions so far?
You said something
Yeah.
also about white space.
Yes.
Could you repeat that again? You said case insensitive.
Yeah, it's case insensitive and trailing white space is ignored. So just, and you don't need to type what I'm typing now because it won't be valid SQL, but I want to show you a visual. This is my first name. These 2 strings are considered equal because this part is ignored. Beginning white space is respected, so just be ready for that. It can really trip people up. Go ahead.
Hey Derek, right where it says 100% in between the query window and the results, right where it says 100%.
Oh, you want me to zoom in?
You just bump it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just for the, yeah.
It won't work on the results, but it'll
That's
work on the
okay,
query.
Yeah. So at least in the top part. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I can probably give, we don't need this, that'll give us a little bit more space there. Alright, I'm going to go back, account. Top, in, and between. Yeah, we'll do between. Let's introduce between. So just to see my record set, I'm going to delete the where clause and then add it back because I want to be able to visualize. So let's change the where clause to age is between 24 and 26. So this is a special one. You don't see this a lot in a lot of languages, but there is, SQL has this between operator. It's doing exactly what you think it does. Give me all customers and all columns for those customers where the age is between 24 and 26. I believe that's inclusively, but we'll double check that. You see if we run it, it's Alice. And it's still Alice fetching at 25, so it is inclusive. So it will include 24s and 25s. So that's between. Let's do a couple others, and then we'll get on to some more fun queries. Substring, L-trim. Let's introduce case. So case occurs here in the select. Case has 2 ways it can work. I'm just going to show you one of them. Case when age, oops, I'm used to C#. You will often see me accidentally type equals twice because I'm used to a different language. And I'll explain what I'm typing or why all this works after I make sure that it works. You'll notice, by the way, I'll often type and then I'll quickly hit F5 and make sure I typed it correctly. Since this is a query language and we're typing it live in this window, often I'll type it incorrectly and I don't know the error until I try to run it. But let's see what I did here with case. So I did do a comma after the star, so we're basically adding a 4th column, but I added some logic here. And all I'm saying is that when the age is 25, set it to 1, which is effectively equal to true if you're doing a Boolean expression, else 0, and then I end the case. So the case begins here, It ends here, and we ask when this is true, display as this, else this. And you can have many then clauses, but I just wanted to show you case exists. It's one of the cool things you can sort of put right into the query and do a little bit of logic there. You don't want to be doing advanced business logic, but you can do a little bit of logic here. So if I wanted to, and I probably should, we'll talk about aliases now. You'll notice every time that I do this comma and do something like a built-in function, or this, it says no column name. Well, that's not only ugly, it's confusing. Like you don't know what the 0 means. So let's talk about something called aliases. So at the end here I can do as, and I'm going to put it in brackets because that's just common. The brackets, by the way, goes back to your space question. You could actually use spaces and columns with these brackets, but we're not going to be talking about that. Is 25. So just as an example, that's going to be my fake column name. So what you can do in select statements is use aliases and generate fake or replacement column names. If I press F5 now, it looks like the database has 4 columns. It doesn't. You'll notice here on the left, it still has 3, but we've made the query look like there were 4. That's totally legitimate. People do that all the time. You'll be doing it quite often. And you can see now that number value, which is effectively a bit, a Boolean value, now answers the question, is the person 25? This is a contrived example. You probably wouldn't type this exact case in a production product, but you can see that it's a technique we can use as database developers. Okay. Any questions so far? Yeah, go ahead.
So NDOS just adds the whatever name you put in there for that column?
Yes.
For the case column or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question was, I believe the question, that just adds the column name for the case statement?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And in fact, I'm repeating it for the people who can't hear your voice.
Okay.
That's all. That's the reason I'm going to try to remember to repeat these questions so everybody else can hear us in Winston-Salem. But just as an example, just to sort of build on what I said to you, you can rename columns that way. So I could have select first name and then the case, and it works. Bob is not 25, Alice is 25, Charlie is not. But I could actually change this first name if I wanted to. Let's reverse it, call it name first. Let's pretend that our application developers demand that name columns begin with the word name. I've been on teams that wanted that. As a DBA, I can alias any column to anything I want. And now it's name first. Right? And what we're seeing here, whenever we run this, you're obviously seeing this in basically a development environment. SSMS is an integrated development environment for SQL Server. What I want you to appreciate is when you run this query from an application, which we'll talk about in about a week and a half, or at least that's when I'll be talking about it with you, this is how it looks to that application. It will come across the wire with these columns, with these names in this order, and these rows in this order. So we're looking at a visualization the app would see, and it's accurate. This is exactly what the app would see. And so, as I said, if the application developer really wanted this to be called name first instead of first name, we have satisfied that, and that's exactly what the app would see. All right, what I'm going to do now, let's insert a little bit more data. So I'm going to do the select again, just because it helps me to see what data is currently in there for presentation purposes. I'm going to add another name here. So let's do another insert, and do please follow along. There will be an exercise coming up in a little bit where you'll be typing some of this yourself from scratch. So be sure to be following along. That should be values. So we'll do David. We'll change the last name. Doe. And I want to give the same age as somebody else. So I did run that really quickly. I know I'm doing that kind of quick in front of you. If I go too fast, just tell me to slow down. But I did F5 this basically twice. You can see I now have 4 customers. David Doe's right on there, and he shares the age with Charlie. I did that on purpose. So with that data in there, let's look at a different kind of select statement. I'm going to start with select star, but I'm going to come back and change it. I'm keeping the one above it on purpose because I want to have 2 record sets in just a moment. run it to make sure it works. It does. Let me get more on the screen and I'll tell you why I just typed what I did. So we had 4 rows in the original. This is the select stars. This is basically what the table looks like raw right out of the database. You can see there's 2 people with the same age. There are going to be plenty of times where you want to basically take your data and not just view it in its raw format, but collapse it in some way and do some sort of aggregate over top of it. Something that operates over a subset of records in the full data set. So in this case, we'll pretend that the question was that the person who's writing the app developer wanted was, could you please give me a list of ages that are in the database and how many of the customers have those corresponding ages? All right, so our ages are 20, 25, 28, 28. We should see 3 rows. There is 1, and let's get an alias on here. I should give you an alias. I'll call it quantity. There we go. And I'll run it again. There is 1 customer that's age 20. There's 1 that's age 25, and there are 2 that are age 28. So that's what we wanted. So the data looks good, and I do this a lot when I've got my DBA hat on. I do this a lot. I will often take what the developer needs, which is either me or a teammate. I'll run this and tweak it until it's right. So I'm always running these things and adjusting them to make sure it looks right. And now I'll explain to you what I actually did. So we're still starting, let me highlight it. We're still going to say use the customers table. Oops, misclick. We're going to use the customers table. And this is something that I find weird about T-SQL and even ANSI SQL. It starts with a select statement and has a bunch of others, but they don't actually run in that order. They start at the from. So the database engine actually starts with the froms and the joins and all these things. It works down and comes back to the select later. So the first thing that I'm going to suggest you visualize this is that the from ran first, or at least was considered first. So from the customers table, group all the records by age, which it did, and then select out the age, which is the actual group that we chose. So this must always match this. And then add a new column and then do the count. The count is a special, one of a small set of special built-in functions that only works for aggregates, or at least only works well for aggregates. You can use it a couple other ways, but this is the main way you're going to use it. And so when we say count star, the star just means all, but it's all in that group. It's not all 4 records. It's all records in the age group. So count the total quantity of records in the age group. So we did from customers, it grouped by age. It found 3 distinct values. In order, it found 20, 25, and 28. And for each of those, it counted how many were in it and gave us that result, 1, 1, and 2. All right?
I don't have it installed yet, and I'm just curious what would show up if you removed the group by age line.
The best way to answer your question is we're going to try.
An error.
It even tells you that it expected an aggregate function or group by. And it's probably because of that count. So you can do comments here with double dashes. Age would obviously work. So it saw when we did this that this was an aggregate function, and I hadn't aggregated yet. I hadn't picked what we're aggregating on. So basically the answer is that would be invalid. I've got to have it in there, and I have to type it correctly. There we go. All right. So group by does kind of what it says. It takes whatever records you have come from your from and your joins, and we'll talk about joins a little bit later, groups by them, and then you can perform all sorts of fun stuff up here. You do have to reselect out the group here for it to make sense. Let me do a couple others. Let's do. This one won't really make sense for age, but it will. Oh, I thought some would work right there. Age, some star. I'll do a different one. I'll do average.
You have to do the field to age.
Oh, that's right. I'll leave that. I'll skip a couple of these because my goal here is not really to show all of these features, just sort of show that they're in there. Except I'm not going to go through all the built-in functions and all the different contrivances just yet. But I will. That did make me think that we could just do plain old sum of age. So we could answer this question. We don't need a group by if we're going to do an aggregate over just the full set. So in this case, kind of a ridiculous request, but they could say, could you give us the sum of all ages? And you can do that. So we do have, it's one of the many built-in functions of age. We could also do average. What is the average age of the customers? If you do the math in your head, we should be somewhere in 26 range, approximately. 25. It rounded for us. Oh, question?
I don't know a lot of the words that you're saying, so when you said something about aggregate, can you repeat that sentence and explain it?
Which sentence?
I don't know.
Okay. So did the sum make sense?
Yeah, I understand how to do that, but what are we aggregating from where to what? I don't understand what we're doing.
Gotcha. No. Okay. The question is just basically what are we doing? So I'll give it more elucidation here. Once again, we're starting from the customers. We have no where clause and there's no group by. So we're basically saying take all the original records. And I just kept this record set on the screen so we could see it. All I'm actually showing is this. We're basically saying take all of those records. I'm going to change this to sum. I think sum's easier to sort of grasp. Start with the customers table, and then for the age column, which is what's in here, walk through every single record and add them. So it picked up the number 20, added 25 to that, that's 45. It then went to somewhere in the 60s and ended up at 101. The term we use often is aggregate or aggregation. It's just some sort of function, usually mathematical, over a set. Because if we don't do the sum, like let's take off the sum, we're still going to get 4 records here, right? It's the original 4 records without the names. That's just a normal select age. But the moment I put sum on, what I'm telling SQL Server to do is perform addition over all the records and give back 1 row, not 4. Even if there were a billion customers, I would only give back 1 row. And that's the result of summing. And the sum, we call that an aggregate function. It's collapsing the whole thing down. Most of the aggregates you'll get in SQL Server and even other languages, they're almost always mathematical. They're almost always a very limited set. It's usually sum, average. I think there's standard deviation. I'll show you min and max right now, just for fun. But you're usually doing math over a set and coming down to 1 value.
It's kind of like in Excel, right? Like if you do the auto sum, everybody's kind of like taking a cell or a row, a column in Excel, and then do auto sum at the bottom. It's doing a sum of all those rows, and that's essentially what SQL Server is doing. Same thing.
Yep, I can show that. I'll open Excel and show that since it did come up. While it's opening, I will show a couple others that are really straightforward. What's the minimum age from the whole customer database? What do you think the value is going to be? 20. 20. There is a max. What do you think that value is going to be? 28. Right on the money. So there's a few of those available. They're pretty powerful. They're used quite often. So I just wanted to point out that those are there. I think there's a standard deviation one, but we'll skip that. And I'll do that Excel example that Harper was talking about. One moment. I'll show this one example. So you have 1, 2, and 3. You can actually in Excel select all 3. And if you look at the bottom right, it's very small. Sorry for everyone who wants to say, I'll move my mouse around it. That says sum 6, count 3, average 2. So Excel actually performed 3 different aggregations as I moused over this. And aggregation is a big fancy word for simple math. It's either doing addition, a little bit of division for average, and counting is just the quantity of rows selected. What was your question?
Before when we were putting in the select sum or average or anything with age, it recognizes, does it just automatically recognize that we're coming from the column that's only integers, or do we put that in earlier in the table to signify that that column would only be integers? Because obviously you can get like the
we did that during the design.
name.
So the question is, how did it really know that it's an integer that could be averaged? That's the basic question. In the design, I actually put that in as an int, and if you see here in the column definition, it says int here. Great question though. And I'll sort of move my mouse around for the for people in Winston-Salem. This int told it that would work. So when I specified here, it's just going to magically work. You bring up a good question. We'll try average first name. You're going to get red. If you try to do things that don't work, you're going to get red. That's why you'll often see me, even before I tell you why I type something, I sneak in a quick F5 to make sure I typed it correctly. Obviously, even after years of experience, I can actually put on like a trailing comma and oops, put in too many characters. You'll be doing that a lot. When we go to exercise mode, feel free to press F5. You're not going to break anything, just keep pressing it. You can see it returns really quickly, and you can sort of learn as you go. But you'll see a lot of red if you specify or if they have the wrong data types. It's a good question though. The data types are pretty strict in SQL Server. There's a little flexibility. It'll help you convert strings to other types, but not the other direction. And like we just tried, if something requires a number, you got to use a number. Let's touch on a couple others. So what I want to do is select. I'm going to do this. You wouldn't really do this in a production product, but just for the sake of presentation, we're going to write two different selects and pull out one of the customers. So let me just do. I'll do Bob and David. So follow along. First name goes Bob. Write a whole different select. We'll do David. If we run that, press F5, you'll see we ran two different queries. And we were running one script, but two different selects took effect. From the database point of view, we got two different data sets, first one and the top one. Well, there will be times when, for performance reason, it'll be a really good idea to end up with a record set, possibly from a table over here, and a record set from over here, and merge them together. I call each of these two things a record set, by the way, the top and the bottom. Top and bottom. Sometimes you want to merge those together. There's a very easy way to do that in SQL. You just type the word union between them. It's the same two rows in the same order, but it smushed them together. Right? It actually also did what's called a distinct, so you can also do union all. For our example, the outcomes are going to be the same. But if it found duplicates, if you just do union, it'll actually eliminate the duplicates and give you only unique values. In this particular case, you probably wouldn't want to type this exact query in a production product, but I will just want you to show you that it's possible to merge record sets together on the fly. And it's one keyword, it's called union. Very simple. It also actually performs relatively well. Even in high transaction situations, unions, at least union all, is highly performant. Question?
I'll come back to it. I don't remember.
Okay, no problem. Union all.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, yeah.
So you said it's going to eliminate duplicate things?
That one would, yes.
That will?
Yes.
Why would you have duplicate? What's duplicated that we're trying to get rid of?
So the question is, the question I'm actually hearing is, Derek, show us a better example, and that's what I'm going to do. Let me do last name Smith. Actually, that won't be any better. I would need to do age. And I'm actually gonna, you don't have to follow this part. I'm gonna open a new window just for my own sanity. I wanna make sure I remember exactly what our data is. Let me do Bob and Charlie, 20 and 28. I think if I do this example, it'll be able to answer your question. And I'll explain why I'm typing all this after I get it typed and after I'm sure that I typed it correctly. I need I'd rather have that be 25. Makes the example better. So here is sort of an answer to your question. So I have two select statements. Let's do it without the union first, because that's much easier to envision. I picked all the last names for customers who are age 20 and all the ones that were age 25. Both of their last names are Smith. They are two different Smiths. We can look at the original data set. They are Bob and Alice. So these are two different Smiths. If I type union all, this basically says give me all the records after the union, I'll get 2 Smiths. But if I remove the all, I get 1 Smith. There will simply be see, that's a much better example. I should have typed this one first, actually. I appreciate the question. This is much more explanatory. There will be cases where sometimes you want the exact quantity match, and there'll be other cases where you really just need distinct. That'll just happen sometimes. Sometimes you're just testing if something exists after you do the union, so you can just shrink the record set down. You'll notice that I did quickly in that example. You can open as many query windows as you want. I'm going to try to have only one open at a time most of the time with you, but you can open any number and work with them all independently. I did it there because I was going to run out of vertical space here real quick, and I just did it for my own sanity. All right, let's manipulate the data, because all we've done some inserts and we've done some reads. Let's talk about updating and deleting. So just so we know what we're dealing with, I'll always be getting the original record set back on the screen. Hopefully that is helpful. So here's our original set. Let's say we want to change the age of Alice. We want her to be incremented by 1. Well, the way we do, remember we have CRUD, create, read, update, delete. The good news is the U and the D are the first letters of the right terminology here. We have an update statement. The way we do this, we say what table we're going to do, and we use the set keyword. Set age equal to, and we'll actually do this as an algorithm. By algorithm I mean addition, very simple. Now I'm going to pause here, and I'm not going to press F5, and I don't want you to either. I want to point out something that's dangerous, notoriously dangerous with SQL Server peeps, and developers joke about it a lot. It's very easy to be connected to a real server like production, type an update statement, forget to type the where clause, and press F5. If I pressed F5 right now, everybody's age would go up by 1. But I only want it to go up on Alice. I only want her to be incremented by 1. So if I pressed F5 right now, I would break all the records except the one I'm trying to work on, which would be correct. This actually happens a lot. When you're working on a local database, you're safe. But you might end up at an organization where they let you connect to a more important server, maybe a QA server, maybe even production, the ones that the customers are using. And the internet is full of stories about omitted where clauses, and there are a lot of jokes. I just want to take this moment and say be very careful with updates and deletes. Be very careful about accidentally omitting that where clause. It would be very easy to even put in the correct where clause, which I'll do now, and then accidentally only select that part. That's the same mistake because it only runs what I have selected. So just watch out for those where clauses. Don't press that F5 too quickly. Be very careful. Question?
Can you revert your mistakes?
There is no native revert.
Okay, so if I did the update customers set age plus 1, and it did that for like 300 customers,
yes.
I have to go and replace the last name of each customer?
You would need to fix the data, yes.
Or fix the data or whatever.
You would have to fix it. It's such a notorious mistake. I've made it a few times in my career, and it's a real bummer. It's at best it's a bummer. At best it's a bummer.
If you have good backups, it's a bummer.
Yeah, if you have a really nice boss that you have a lot of currency with, it might not be too bad. Question in the back?
So would you have to go through and manually change each one? Or
Pretty much.
Change it to -1.
You could do the -1 in this case, but most of the we're presenting right here. We're starting with some contrived small examples. In the real world, usually what's being done is not as deterministic and clean as you think. And if you're doing it on live production, other things could be happening that change those values. That mean you can't just do the -1 because something else might have incremented or decremented it. Maybe it's a price or something other than age that doesn't change as often. So my main message is you should assume that there are no easy ways out of this mistake. Just assume that, even if every now and then there are. Be pessimistic. This is the way to be. So I've made that point. It was on my notes here. You'll inevitably make the mistake. We all have. If you do this long enough, you will. I just hope you make it on a local database that you can just back up and restore and put back in clean shape. But to this day, like even when I've used SQL for, I don't know, more than a decade now. Even when I'm given production like credentials, I have self-imposed rules. Like I have to have earbuds in, I have to be well slept, I can't be hungry or in a hurry. I don't do anything at 4:45 p.m.
Yep. I have mine labeled, my connection strings or production, careful with exclamations.
Yes.
I mean, it literally is like, just be careful.
Yeah.
No matter how long you've been doing it.
There are add-ins for SSMS that, depending on your database name, like color the screen like bright red, like they'll color the background. It's the most common serious crippling mistake. If you think about it, you could contaminate 1 trillion records like that. It's a lot of power in your hands, so be careful with that. So I've harped on that enough. Let's actually get back to making this do something. So what did I type here? I've typed an update statement. So I'm basically saying update the customer's table. Once again, the where is kind of happening before the set. Pick all the customers whose first name is Alice and increment the age. I'm doing set age equals age plus 1. I could have typed the number 26 there, but I wanted to show you can put small expressions in these statements and they will run. I'll make sure to keep where highlighted. Don't make the mistake. Press F5. I did it correctly. 1 row is affected. By the way, if you make the where clause mistake on a production server, you'll know it'll take a little longer than you expected, maybe half a second as opposed to a millisecond, and it'll have a big number here. And then you'll start to panic. I know exactly what it feels like. But if we reselect, we'll see Alice is up to 26. And we can do it again. Let's do Alice one more time. Incremented, reselect. Now she's 27. The other ones are not changing. But I will mimic the mistake. So it's 20, 27, 28, 28. I forgot my where clause. Let's pretend. On my messages window, which is the second tab, it says 4 rows affected. That's a warning that you've over updated. And if we reselect, we will see that they all went up. So they went from 20, 27, 28, 28 to 21, 28, 29, 29. They all got incremented. So update. You can update sets of records. Where clauses work. We're going to be talking about joins later. Joins work. All right. And finally, let's do a delete. Whoops. I will re-emphasize that you can leave off the where clause here, and it will just run this. This will remove every single record every time. So it will completely destroy all customers if I ran it without the where clause. I won't be doing that, hopefully. Otherwise, you'll watch me embarrassingly type it all back. We will remove, let's say, Charlie. I will actually show you a tip. This is a personal tip. It came into my brain years ago. There's something I do to make sure I didn't screw up the where clause. I will actually do the select star first. Let me comment out this top one. I'll actually write it as a select and make sure this record set looks correct. And then what I can do, I can give the table an alias, right? So I told you earlier we can give columns aliases. You can give table aliases too. So C.star ends up doing the exact same thing. All we've done is we've turned the big word customers into lowercase c. It's just an alias. It's a very lightweight feature. There's no magic here. It just saves you from typing everything. But in this case, when I'm trying to write a great delete statement, but I don't want to really mess it up, I'll write a select, make sure that this looks correct, which it currently does, and then I can come in here and do delete C. If I F5 this, I'll only see 1 row affected. It did run correctly, and we can verify that by re-executing the select. And you'll see we're down to only 3 customers, so I did do that correctly, starting off with the select. Question in the back?
So so what you did in from is you gave, like, you told it to choose customers to start with the letter C?
No, this is an alias.
For customers?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I see.
For the customers table.
That's just a shortcut, so you don't have to type. Okay.
Yes. I basically showed you 2 things at once here. I showed the whole writing it as a select statement first, then using delete, but I also showed you table aliasing is possible. Table aliasing doesn't look too exciting here because we were only selecting from one table, but later on we're going to be doing joining across multiple tables, and it just saves you fingers sometimes not to have to type. Some production products I've been on will have very long table names, and there's sort of a common vernacular in different companies. They'll have different shortcuts for their table names.
So is it like a variable just for that time being, just for that
Yep.
piece of
Just for this query.
Yeah, okay.
Just scoped in this query.
Okay.
In fact, it doesn't work
Okay.
like up here.
Okay.
Like this would be illegal even if I placed it below the other one. That alias is just for the scope of what I have highlighted.
Okay.
And it is just an alias. It's just another, it's a synonym. It's a name. It doesn't do any extra work. It's just another thing you can do. Same way you can alias columns, you can alias tables. We have deletes. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about nulls, and then we'll do an exercise, and you all will try to write some stuff on your own. So when we created this customers table, I'm going to go back to it. Do please follow along. I can right-click on customers and go back in that design mode. Let's give it, we'll do an email column. We'll make that a varchar 100, just because some emails are kind of long. But I'm going to leave this allow nulls set to true, or leave the checkbox in it. So what do we mean with nulls? Let me get a select on here so you can see what's already happened to the data set. So I added that column, and I moved kind of quick there. So I did type email, I gave it varchar 100, I left this checkbox, and I did press save. I might have done that quicker, and you might not have noticed it, but I did click save. It did successfully save. I went over to the other window. I've selected. You can see I've got a new column in the database. And on the left side, you can refresh. Right-click on columns, refresh. You'll see email here, bar chart, and it's null. The others are not null. This one is null. So what does null mean? It just means optional. Nulls are very common. You can see on the designer it's actually the default. Depending on the team you're on, some are pretty strict about whether or not nulls are allowed. They're pretty picky. Some places are not picky, some places are. My personal preference, I'm pretty picky about nulls. I don't make things null unless they need to be. And I won't get too deep into it, but what you need to know about nulls is they have special syntax. And they can really trip you up with like where clauses and things of that nature. So what I'm going to do, I've got my 3 customers. Remember, we deleted one, so we're down to 3. I'm going to throw an email onto just one of them. So let's do an update statement. Update customers. Set email equal to, and just give it a fake email, abc@abc.com. That'll be sufficient. Where, don't forget the where clause. We know what happens if we don't do that correctly. First name equals Bob. In quotes. Now before I press F5, I'm going to point out something. There's red squigglies on the screen. That email column is considered invalid, even though we just added it and it's really there. This is just something that's been in SSMS for years, and they've never changed it. I'm not going to call it a bug, but it's close to one. It's an annoyance. Basically, whenever you have a query window open, it doesn't constantly check the database to see if it has schema changes. So this window was opened before the email column existed, and it doesn't know about it. This can be really annoying and trip you up. I'm just going to show you the quick tip. You go to the Edit menu, IntelliSense, refresh local cache. We could just close and reopen the window, but you will be in cases, you'll be on the job. You might have a window full of lots of stuff you've typed. It's inconvenient to retype it all or copy and paste it. You can do this refresh, and if you wait a moment, the red squigglies go away. That refresh actually re-asks the database what's the schema and gets this query window up to date. So just want to point that out. It would have still run even if we hadn't done that. It just, the red squigglies give you the impression it's broken, but it's actually not. It's just an annoyance. I have no idea why it's still there. I wish they would fix it, but probably for performance reasons they didn't. Question?
I'm having errors trying to save it. I don't know why. It says saving changes not permitted.
Harper, just let.
Sorry.
It's okay. Do you have the ability to override it?
Yeah, like I try to say.
No, save it. Does anybody else have the same problem? Okay, then I'm going to keep moving, and Harper, you let me know if I can help. So if we relook at the records, oop, I didn't run it. Oops, let's actually run it now. So once again, updating customers, find all the ones name with the first name of Bob, and give them an email address. So we did. One row affected, we select it, we see that Bob has an email, and the others do not. The reason I want to give a special nod to nulls is they're weird in how you use them. So if we do where email equals at abc.com, we will get Bob's record, right? This is a standard select with a where clause, just like we've been typing. You might think to get the other two records, you could type that. It runs and gives you an empty record set. This is the weirdness of nulls with queries. You actually have to say is null. That gives you those two. And you can say is not null, which will give us the one Bob record. Kind of weird. It works, but if you think about it, you could very easily write queries that have equal, the equals operator, and end up with record sets that look correct but are missing records. That happens often, so just have it put a special asterisk in your brain, a little note, a little star, that says when I'm working with nulls, they require special syntax. Let's also look at some other things. So if we do select star, we have emails of ABC and then null null. But I'm going to do a new column here. I'll give it an alias and show you a new function. So is null email empty string as clean email. So this is a built-in function. It's only there because nulls exist. I want to show it to you in this part of the presentation. I added it as just a second alias column called cleaned email. What we're saying is, if it's null, give us an empty string. Otherwise, give us the non-null value that's in the table. So Bob's email comes across unchanged, but the two nulls get converted to empty strings. And they could have been converted to anything. I'll do ASDF just to show you that it's possible. Right? So once again, not only are the where clauses special, there are some other methods, functions, that are related to null. There's also one called coalesce. I think I'm not going to go into it. I don't think I need it for the exercise, so I'm going to skip it. We can go into exercise mode. So before we go into exercise mode, questions?
Okay, I've got a request from Al and them. They can't, because it's kind of dark, they can't see you. So can I flip on the lights?
Yeah.
And just do like a little micro bio, just sort of, kind of how you got started and that kind of.
We want to do a bio?
Real short. Yeah,
Okay.
Just real
Sure.
short. Just kind of say hello to Winston, kind of tell them a little about
Okay.
who you are, how you got started, that kind of thing.
How I got started?
Which is
That's a long story.
Yeah. But just your SQL journey.
My SQL journey. Okay. Actually, my SQL journey begins at the very beginning. Right. So, were there any questions just about the nulls or anything like that before I start talking about myself? Okay. Great. Cool. We will go into exercise mode shortly, so you'll have your own stuff. So, my SQL journey actually began at the beginning. I got my very first job was a software job. I have one of those weird stories where I did know as a young person what I wanted to be. I was going to be a software developer, and dropped out of high school and emancipated from my parents, and became a developer at 16. I had a great job lined up already, and I went into that. And as soon as I went into that, they were using, at the time, I think it was SQL Server 6.5, which was immediately before they did the change. It was originally written by a company called Sybase, and Microsoft bought them, and they've just been improving it ever since. So it became, the company was moving from 6.5 to 2000. So I immediately was in the SQL world. They did have Access databases, which I was working on, which do have similar query syntax. So I learned a lot of the query syntax from Access. But very quickly, I was using the earliest versions of SSMS for SQL Server 2000, which was the actual version number. It was also the year approximately it came out. And as short as it sounds, I've been using it ever since. I've generally been on the Microsoft stack. So most of the companies I've been at are SQL Server as their database technology, as Ali was saying, like the baseline of the product, where all the great stuff is, where all the actual data is in SQL. And I was either writing in Visual Basic, Visual Basic.net, or, as you'll learn in a week, C#, which is what I've been doing the most of in that interim. Most of the time, most of my jobs have been with SQL. So, and that's why I can claim over a decade of experience. A good chunk of that, I was exclusively SQL. So to Ali's point, I actually migrated from a software developer to really DBA. That was my title. And I was in that for many years. I was very happy with it, but I've come back full circle. I think I prefer C#, like if I just had my choice. But to Ali's point he was making earlier, I'm showing you not even the tip of the iceberg. There's no iceberg. You can't even see some of the cool stuff that's in SQL. You would be shocked at the amount of power that it has. I'll sometimes consult on, I'm an independent contractor right now, I'll sometimes consult on a project and they'll be like, our database is slow. When every time we query this table, it's slow. And I ask them, how many records is in it? It's like, oh, we got so many records. Well, how many? 10,000. And I have to stifle laughter. Harper's laughing over here. 10,000 is a very small number, because I've seen the power of this system. On even moderately weak hardware, you can construct databases to be extremely efficient. And we'll talk about a couple ways to do that in these 3 days. Not all of it. The rabbit hole goes real deep. But I need somebody to tell me that there are billions of rows. That's with a B. That's 9 zeros. Before I feel really excited about the performance problem. Because up until about 1 billion rows, it's kind of, they're probably just making a mistake. It's probably something simple. It won't be really a challenge. It's probably something simple. I'm just kind of experienced. I'm used to coming in and hitting a button and then those problems disappear. The fun ones, though, are in the billions of records, or even higher. But I was fortunate enough that my initial work at that first job was not large data sets. I could be a little bit more cavalier and sloppy. They could give me a lot more privileges, and I couldn't hurt anything, and we got it working. But later in my career, I was on bigger real production servers, multi-core, 200 gigs of RAM, huge systems, billions of records, active records. I'm not talking archive where we create the record and store it for 10 years. I'm talking we create the record and we're manipulating it, every minute, or even multiple times a second in some extreme cases. I think this is the part where if Ali was here, he'd probably want to talk. Just knowing him, because I've known him for so many years, those are really the fun projects. It might seem kind of simple, that, it's just like a spreadsheet, but a little bit more complicated. But it's so much nicer than that. There are concepts like indexing and partitioning and all of these fancy terms we use to describe all these other features. You can see that there are other things on the screen here, all these programmability and what is an index and what are table statistics. And as you pull those onion layers, you'll decide independently, each of you, if that's exciting or not. I can tell you, as I pulled those layers back, and obviously for Ali as well, it gets cooler and cooler the deeper you go. And these systems are really impressive. So I've always been either on Access databases or SQL Server as far as relational databases. For non-relational, you don't talk about SQL Server. There are other database types. The current big popular terminology is NoSQL, NoSQL, or graph databases, things of that nature. Those are different technologies, but we're not going to be talking about those. Relational databases are a first-class citizen. They are big in and of themselves, and they're a big enough topic. You can basically specialize in them. You can specialize in a single product like SQL Server, or its big competitor Oracle, right? That's its big competitor in the paid market. You can be exclusive to this if you think it's cool. Full-time and paid well, so if that gets your ear. And those companies that are just absorbing data and they're using a relational database and they're absorbing just gigabytes every day, The databases are huge, and they need absolute experts. And you can get there, and it's really fun. I got to that point. I was in the multi-billion row part, but I came back to C#. You'll see when I present on those. You'll probably detect I'm a little bit more excited about those. I think Ali and I are very complementary. We're both excited about everything, but I lean a little bit more toward the C#. How's that? Is that good? Is that what people are looking for?
Perfect.
All right. I didn't know I came here to talk about me. I didn't want to talk about me. I'm talking about technologies. I'm not that exciting. The technologies are super exciting. I do love SQL though. So, good there. Should we like start the exercise and then do a break, or do we need a break?
Well, yeah, like explain the exercise.
Yeah.
And then we'll give everybody kind of a bathroom break, and when they come back, they can start working on it. That'd be perfect.
Okay. I got some notes here for an exercise. So I've showed you a lot of stuff. So the goal here with these exercises is to exercise the muscles that I just showed you, but you can't cheat. Like, you can't reuse what we've done here, right? You're going to have to create some new table with new columns. So I've got a couple notes here. It actually will be very similar. What I'm going to ask you to do is just create a new database. Remember, I was working in Alpha? Go ahead and just create you a new one. I'll go ahead and create mine since I'll be doing it. I'm going to call it Bravo. Once again, I'm using the native phonetic alphabet. We'll create less than 26 of them. Bravo. So make a note if you want, because basically here's the spec. I don't have the spec written to show on the screen. I probably should have done that. I apologize.
I'm writing down.
All right, wonderful. Wonderful. So give me a database. Let's do a customers table. Give it a customer name. Just a single string will be fine. But customers also have 2 phone numbers, an optional age, a creation date. That's a creation date for the record, not the person. We'll do a modified date and a bit value for promotional opt-in. Just call it promotion opt-in.
What was that? What was the last two? Creation date, and then what?
Promotion opt-in. That'll be a bit. I'll go ahead and give you that as a tip. It's going to be a bit, because I didn't show you bits up here. Bits are Boolean values. They're true falses. So basically, these customers can opt in to whether they get promotional emails or not. Let's throw an email address in there too, Harper, as well. So I want you to design a table, and then I'm going to give you some queries here. You don't have to do all these in order, but these are just some. Just pick 1 or 2, type them, pick all of them if you can, if you have enough time. Let's pretend, I'm just going to give you a few scenarios. We want to list customers created within the last week, but I want their full name to be in a format, and I will put this on the screen. It'll be last name, first name. So it'll be like Smith, Bob. The other one is list all adult customers with the same format. Just give me their names. And list the first names and email addresses of all customers that can receive promotional emails. Am I going too fast, Harper?
First names and email addresses.
That can receive promotional emails. That should be a good start. I have a couple others, but let's start with that so we can feel out how comfortable people are with the exercise process. So that's it. You're going to have a new database, new customers table with columns specified. Write those queries. If we're not done with the exercise time and you have extra time, write some other queries. Maybe we can show them off and play with them. Just do that on your own, and we'll see how it goes.
Yep. So yeah, we'll do like a 10-minute break, and then everybody come back. We'll give you some time to kind of work on that, create the database, and list those queries. In the question, the exercise is in the questions channel in Slack. As you know, create the table with these columns, and then pull these queries back from. And hopefully I wrote that right. You can look in the questions thing in Slack and make sure.
We're pretty flexible. Right. I mean, I'm looking at my list. It's approximately what I had. We'll make it work.
Okay.
So can we, for the people who don't have this
Yes.
program yet?
Yeah, for the people who don't have either SQL installed or can't connect locally, let me know. We'll walk around and sort of help with that. That was awesome.
You think so?
Yes.
I
Awesome.
want to
Perfect.
solicit your feedback.
The only feedback they had on the stream, they say that the video is super crispy. They said like for whatever reason, maybe it's this built-in mic.
Yeah.
But whenever you were like turning and doing something and coming back, it would like chop the audio a little bit.
Okay. That
It's
makes
possible
sense.
too that the processor might be like pegging a little bit and killing the audio, like chopping it a little bit. I don't know. All right.
Yeah.
So give the install a try. If you go out to the installation instructions, go to you Windows 10, right? Windows 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
To do SQL Server
Is there any way that you can go over
Express
quickly, because I was
2017.
having issues with
To go over what?
Download.
very quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Because I was having issues with my database while you were going.
Yep. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to get my Slack open
So what you're gonna
to
want
the Empower
is you're
channel, and
gonna,
then I'll be right
Go
over.
ahead and
Okay,
install
thank you.
that, but look at the instructions on the Empower, the Empower course site /info. You know how there's like remember those installation instructions for all the other stuff?
Yeah.
Course content. Go to the main info page. I forget where that is. I think there's a link from course content maybe. Yeah. Try you can go to course content. I think there's a link back to the main site from there. Go down a little bit, then all the way to the bottom. Yes, that. Then you want installations page right there, and then scroll down.
And for phone numbers and stuff like that? would
That's
you
the
use
instructions
bar
right
chart, or
there.
would you use
Okay. So
integers, right?
No, I
just
love
pop
that question.
open. There should be like a
I love
PDF.
it because
Click on, yeah. Click on
I
that.
have disagreed
Follow as closely as you can
with
those
a lot of people on that
instructions with
topic.
your
Let me make sure I'm in
install.
the right.
And
I'm
you
getting
should be,
Empower
like,
here.
set up
Hang
kind of
on.
the right way for the class. Let me know.
I
if
don't
that
have it here. Oh
What's
well.
up? Let me know if that deviates at all. But I think you've got. See if you go back over to
Okay.
your installation. So you want custom. Okay, now switch back to your instructions and kind of start from there. Like start reading through. It may look a little bit different in the very
Can I
beginning.
just type in both of these?
What's that?
DB /
Yeah.
backup, just like that.
Mhm. You may have to create that folder first. Like read through the instructions, make sure, because it'll tell you kind of step by step how to do it. You may have to go create this folder first. But if you follow those instructions, you should be good to go. Uh-huh.
Most products
That's okay. You can say it.
people just accept the stream right from the customer.
And you're following through with the instruction sheet. Yep.
I went through the,
I wrote them.
yeah, and I went to just some custom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the provider I'm using requires fully qualified country code, area code, no spaces, no hyphens, specific format.
Make sure you get that PDF up, because you gotta follow the instructions like step by step.
Okay.
But all their stuff was included by customer's fingertips. They straight with. They got spaces, they got hyphens, sometimes they have parentheses. It varies from record to record. And so we're having to clean all that data up retroactively.
Click this instructions. Click that.
Oh,
That's the PDF, that's the whole, it'll give you like a very detailed, kind of line by line of what to do.
Bit was the wool, right? Bit is wool, right?
Bit and boolean are basically the same thing. In SQL parlance, it's just a zero nuance because they call it a bit field. But it is like, it also represents like true false, like one, true, zero, false.
Yeah.
So some people call it booleans, like.
Yeah, because you can do that, like, with JavaScript.
Yeah.
What you have to do is you'll see when you start getting into, back end web, how the native data types in C# map roughly to a single structure, strings, dates, integers, and then booleans and back to bits.
So does this link into like Node.js, like,
So that
Node
is this gonna?
Node can use SQL Server. Normally though, it's going to use something like MongoDB or MySQL or one of the like open source
What people will do is let's bring it to the table.
Microsoft stuff will use SQL Server, but they can use both. They have drivers for each other. Y'all have everything installed and everything?
Now actually you mentioned.
For created
Your instance type sets off as like where.
Anytime. So if you look in that list, there
That
should be one.
runs always wrong. It's always an equal. It's not possible for it to equal.
And that's going to create kind of like a, well,
It's really confusing.
you can do it two different ways. You can use a timestamp, which is going to like, every time you create a new record, it's going to like stamp it out in there. Or you can use like a date time like that and have more control over it. Then when you're inserting your records, remember that get date or get UTC date like function? When you're doing your inserts, you can use that like as the value. It's kind of like just stamp the date out in there. And that's pretty common. Usually it happens with the, usually it happens within your code. you'll have a special thing called an ORM, which is like an object relational mapper, which takes your objects in your code and like match them into inputs. So when you save stuff, it like kind of knows where to put it. So you don't really have to write a lot of SQL. So again, we're kind of like showing you hard way, and then we'll show you like an easier way from code to like put stuff in database. But when you use those, normally you'll have something that like when the ORM, when that code inserts a record, it like can stamp out a create date for you. And then when it updates it, it'll stamp out an update for you. Those two things are really, really handy to have like in every table as timestamps because it gives you like a yes, it gives you like yeah, if you're it helps with like diagnosing problems, and it helps with like who did this when, and sort of you know it kind of helps you go back to the crime scene and sort of figure out what happened if something goes wrong. So those two things, like the create that and last updated timestamps, you'll see in all kinds of production databases. Sometimes with the like who did this, and last updated by, created by, like the user ID type of thing. And that gives you like a, you know, not necessarily play by play, but at least who made this and then who last touched it. Like super common.
Leave their phone number and their email.
You have everything installed, okay?
Okay, cool.
I have Windows 7, so
it's the earlier one. That's okay. That's okay. You were able to like all of the examples of
Things that
Alright,
have
perfect.
nulls in them, and then differentiate like the ones that have nulls as well.
Yes, and we did that.
Yeah.
Where it is.
Okay, so that is.
That gives that function. So you say is null, is null. You just can't use equals and null.
Yeah, okay.
You just can't use those.
Strings are
The problem with those is that they
different.
work.
So you can
They
have
say that they
bar
work
char
always
in
wrong.
bar char.
Yeah.
The worst kind of bug.
Bar char is variable characters and
which is their own exception.
bar char Unicode set. But they store it differently, right? And you see a letter or a character is
So let me
one byte,
answer
right?
You're
Bar
in
char,
charge.
2 bytes, something like that.
By default, text
And then with bar char, since it can be a Unicode character, you can store each one of these double storage, right? You can store
passes
lots of
along
them.
to the web server.
So
and
it's
C#
2 and 4 or
always
4
equal.
and char.
It's actually ABC my whole way through.
But so if you know that you're never going to have Unicode
Unless
characters,
some
you can use
or you can use a third party
bar char. These days, like what's not Unicode, right?
Even then,
If you're showing strings, you really want to be so almost always use bar char. Right? And then if you're storing something like a notice, this giant thing where it's like $1 million is in bar char max, which is like
different kinds of
take notes, you know, like normally you're gonna have it with a link, first and last names are only gonna be, you know, so long you wanna save space in your table, so you're gonna have like a link on it.
Unless I must.
It doesn't quite look like the instructions thing. I don't want to be. It doesn't quite look like what the instructions says it's supposed to. So like, I created the directory. I right-clicked, run as admin, and it says when presented with this screen.
That might be a little bit later. Yeah, the Express Edition for Windows 10 it might be a little bit different. But keep on going in that's right. That's where your stuff is going to go. So hit install there. At a certain point, it'll go from this like nice looking kind of black screen to like the crappy old gray looking screen, I think. And then it'll look more like the instructions, I believe. Does anybody else have? Okay, yeah, install. All right, so go ahead to just look at SQL Server 2017 Express.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it already has a.
And then, and then click that, download it, and get the install running. Scroll down.
When I had problems at first, like putting in the server name. I had it already installed, but I had problems like doing the server name.
If you, are you on Windows 7? If you're on Windows 7, you might need SQL Server 2014. The later versions won't install on 7. That
I
might
was
be a
on
problem.
10 and I had installed it right, but I looked up the problem and I already had C# 2017.
Redistributable?
Yeah, I had to delete those two and then reinstall it. It worked. If anybody has
Try, this may not, if you're on Windows 7, this may not install, but let's try it.
Sometimes that is the work sometimes. Is it's just your AC request time out 30
That
seconds.
first one's
So
not.
you're taking 6 days off, and it takes 15.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. It is only that larger scale.
This may not work if you're on Windows 7 and you may have to do SQL Server 2014, but it's exactly the same. So it'd be like 2014 Express Edition. And it's basically the same. I don't think we're going to be using any of the 2017 features. There's like all kinds of like geo mapping queries and stuff, but I don't think we're going to be doing any of that. Yeah, like when we were looking at maps the other day, where you can say like X, Y, and then you can say like find me a radius or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't here yesterday. That was a map day.
When you open it, you probably solve this. Gotcha. If you drop
So I
it,
figured out how much
if not,
Okay.
So I understand how much
Mhm.
drop it.
So the main things to look for at this point are select. Select is like, what do you want to get, right? So select star is like, give me all the columns. Select where you're saying like the name of the column. It's like select first name, last name. So select is just, what are you going to get? What are you going to bring back, right? So you can either do star, which is like all the columns, or you can do name the columns that you want back. Right? From. Yep. Just select first name, comma, last name, whatever. You just do commas in between what you want. They're not really variables. They're just it's names of the fields. So we see how you have customers here. So I want to get first name and last name from customers. I don't care about age and email. I can just say select first name, comma, last name from customers from the table. So select is what you want. From is where you want it from. Which table, right? Think about like Excel. Which worksheet do you want it from? Which table? And then where is like, okay, give me a filter, right? It's like where age is greater than 10. So get me all my customers where this, where first name is this, where last name is this, where age is more greater and less than this thing. It's sort of like a filter on it. So select is what, from is where, and then your where clause is like how to filter it down. Like give me, I don't want everything in the table. I want just customers, where their age is greater than 20. Give me these, That's it. Those are the three. I mean, there's three keywords are kind of the main composition of a select, right? And then you have update, set this field equal to this value, where the customer name equals this. So that's, you're updating it.
Yes.
Delete, same thing. Delete customer. Delete from customer where last name equals whatever. Only deletes those ones out. We haven't gone over primary keys yet, but usually you're going to have like an ID for each of these rows. So if you want to like delete a very certain one, you would usually delete it by ID, right? You get a reference to that ID and delete just that one out. So create is insert into table with these values.
So like the word just insert into.
And for any of these things you don't understand what the word means, the way to query it, the way to Google it is T-SQL, and then T-SQL insert. It'll show you how to do an insert. T-SQL update. How do you do an update? So just Google for T-SQL and then the and whatever word you're confused about. It's nice documentation, like real nice documentation.
She has SSMS with SQL not installed. I checked services. She has only SSMS.
Interesting.
Yeah, she's got like a profile she made in the but the actual service for SQL not on it.
Okay, so we'll just download.
Which was in Windows earlier this week.
If you've already downloaded it, are you on this Windows 10, right? It looks like it. It's Windows 10. Is that what you have installed? Okay. So if you're on Windows 10, if you follow those instructions for the install, and you've got
So the queries are all going like select.
Correct. Those are tricky.
Table here.
Yeah, because I have this part, I think this is the Secret Express thing, but the Secret Server Manager, that's what we have.
Yeah.
And here
you got to install the database function behind it. So if you click on those instructions, if you go all the way through that and do the installation, you should be good to go. It is going to be a little while. Yeah. Do you have a download link already? You've already got it downloaded, right?
Yep, I've been doing a recurring exercise with email address, bit fill, promotional.
I don't know where you put them.
They're
They're gonna be down.
I know those are
Mhm.
So let's see.
SQL Server.
Cause this class computer, this is what I think this computer
Look at
course.
this. So, they need that number.
There we go. SQL Server Express. Yeah, double look that in.
So we're doing 0.
When you're done, say, well, not yet, but when you're done, it will ask you for a table. That's where you're going to need.
I just typed it in on a 0.
Now you gotta go over and follow the.
Oh, that was the
Go back to that PDF.
At first I thought those were
follow
like
line by line,
things to
make
hit.
sure- Make sure.
I'm like, why?
You're putting
Why
all
would you?
the right things in there. Yeah,
This
yeah.
keypad doesn't have a
It
0.
goes all the way through,
Glad
that
to help.
should install the
Yeah,
SQL
sorry.
Server
I was just
engine. You've got like the tool, you've got that part, but you need like the database underneath it. And once you get that installed, you'll be good to go. Daytime. Yep. So, when y'all are creating your table, hey Derek, the created at or created date on the table, that should just be a date time, right? We're not,
Yeah,
you didn't get a
any
timestamp or
times.
anything.
Daytime two.
Okay. So when you're building your table, that create date in the instructions, like build this out, that's just choose date time. In your thing. There are other ways of doing it, like timestamps, but for now, we'll put that date in kind of manually.
So, I don't know what happened, because obviously I was using my Windows last week, but like, I didn't know it was telling me like to verify my product key, and did that, and then it was like follow these instructions or something. So but hopefully I'm about to have, but I don't know why they kicked me out from last time. But I still have the product key, so hopefully it's just gonna let me back in.
Yeah.
This is absurd.
You may not have activated it. You may have like installed it, but there's a little thing that bothers you in the corner that says please activate this. And if you wait for a while and you don't activate it, then it comes up to this and it's like, all right, I'm gonna stop and I won't let you do anything until you activate it. Yeah. Once you activate it, you should be good to go.
Okay, cool.
And then do you
Should've
have
gotten
do you know if you installed SQL on that, SQL Server on that?
Well, here's the thing. I know, like, I installed everything that was on that list before the class started. But I heard you say something about like how Windows 7 can.
So we made, yeah.
You know,
so
I had it there, but it wasn't like
once you get that activation thing done, just Google for SQL Server 2014 Express, and that's the one you'll probably have to install. And then if you pull up like on the main course site, on the info site, they have that installations page. There's a section for, if you click on it in installation instructions on SQL, it'll give you like a nice PDF. Follow that through as closely as you can.
Okay.
Once you download that 2014, you should be good to go.
Okay, cool.
We're not using anything past 2014 as far as like the new
features?
like map selecting and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I didn't think so. So yeah,
We're not there.
We
So
did
I give
2017
it
by default.
all this code.
Everybody.
Hey, give me one back to put in.
Windows
This is
7
fun. This is a great time.
last 2 copies of this from those.
Nobody
I hope
can steal it
we do
because
this.
nobody can find it.
That mean?
Yep.
Damn Windows. This is how they just get you to upgrade. Like, you're still using 7?
So
Yeah, you thought.
so first names usually so in varchar, the difference between varchar and varchar. Varchar is like ASCII characters, so like A through C is 10 uppercase stuff. It's not gonna have any like Unicode characters like foreign languages and stuff like that. So you're almost always going to use in varchar. So in varchar, like instead of in char. So go to that.
That's some default documents.
In varchar.
We just click the close button.
Like 50 times first name. Like you're basically defining like
Click
the
the
storage.
file.
And like most people's names aren't past 50, so you state that in varchar.
You can even, although it ends in
Age is going to be
document,
integer. So it's like instead of date, so
Proceed with the defaults.
All
That's
these
what I
are
want to hear, baby.
just text.
No, this is not
And then
expected.
they're interpreted by their powerful system, but files themselves 20 times.
email address.
You can save it.
It's all kind of like a little bit of art, right? It's like how big are email address, how big or whatever. It's sort of like usually you kind of start them off, and then once you have like
Genuine
millions
copy
of
of
your
Windows
database,
7.
like, all right, we can make this a little bit smaller, more efficient, but yeah, it's a little bit of a.
Does this like mess up the performance or anything?
Not really, it's just gonna take more space to store. You know what I mean? So basically you're saying that it's stored on disk.
But it is.
I'm gonna use 50 bytes essentially of storage for that field. And so like you wanna get it as small and efficient as you can. That being said, you also don't want somebody to be able to like not put their name in there, you know? So it's kind of a, I'm gonna ask you, Eric, cause I always have, like, whenever I'm designing a database, I'm always like, how big do I need to make this? You know, I always like err on the side of like kind of ridiculousness and bring it in, but, you know, disk space is so cheap these days, especially on servers, it's like, it's like make it a little bigger, you know? So, phone number, you know, I don't know, yeah, make that, 30 or whatever.
Yes, I don't know if we're going to the beginning.
Is there any way like a quick copy or anything?
Yeah, I mean, normally, we'll probably get into it later, but this is kind of like the manual way of doing things. So you can do all these statements, I can say like create table, you know, you can do this as like a typed out statement, and it's like, it's quicker. And I'll show y'all like in a few days how to do this like from code. That's the way you really want to do it, because you want to use something called database migration, where you're defining your database with code, and that way when you go to deploy your system, like it's code running to kind of make these changes. So when you go to test, it's like it's gonna make everything perfect. You know, instead of like, you know, you can make a mistake typing something like that, and you don't want to like have to go make all the same changes in test and like look at this, and then go make changes and change in production, which is dangerous. You want that to be like automated, right? So I'll show you a way in a few days of doing this like with code, and it's repeatable, and you can roll it back too. So you do a deployment, something doesn't go well, it's like let's roll back to last version. And then promotion option is going to be like a bit, so boolean, I think it's called bit in there. Yeah, just that bit. Yeah, and that's just like a 0-1 essentially. It's just a true false kind of. It's sort of a 0-1, it's just a single bit in the computer, and that maps to like a boolean in code.
I got a name right too.
Yeah, that's one of those like style things that like it depends on who you ask, because they're going to give you a different thing. Generally speaking, you don't want spaces in it, like you said. That's one of the big. You can like technically do it, but then every time you reference that field, it's got to be like in brackets to say, hey, this ignore this space here, and so generally don't use spaces. Other than that, yeah, it kind of depends on who you ask. I usually do capital, like so first, like my first name. And the reason why I capitalize things, if you're kind of capital case like that, like, so first name would be capital L, capital N, is because when you map those out into like your code, you're going to have what's called ORM, an object relational mapper. And so like the things coming out of your database are going to be common objects like in C#. And usually properties in C# are dot, and it's like capital D. And so having it like match exactly, it doesn't need to, because it's not case sensitive in most SQL Server stuff, but having them match exactly it just makes it easier. Like you know exactly where it's coming from, and so you don't have to switch from one to the other. So I tend to do it kind of like that, but it depends on who you ask.
Is that what you mean by like relational? What is that?
We'll look at how relations come into play. Right now, we're just playing in one table.
Okay.
We're going to create more tables and then like show how they like join together, and that's the relationship. That's where you're talking about the Venn diagrams. It's like selecting things from this table and join it here, and only where kind of these things are true where they join together, and it's like a mathematical union of those tables. Cool. Yeah, and that's why they call it relational. It's like you don't store everything in one big table. You kind of have a bunch of different tables, and they're usually joined together with IDs.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep.
So these are the 2017 ones. You said
Express edition. Sorry. If you're on Google for SQL Server 2014.
So I have this here. Is this the one I wanted? Because this was already. That's wrong.
It's not. The full thing isn't installed there. Though.
Oh, okay.
So if you go up to the top and Google for SQL Server 2014 Express.
Oh.
Yep. And that one, yep. And click that download link, and then just install that.
Like check these.
No, you're gonna have to know. Do you have a? If you go right here real quick, and do right click on computer. Right out there. Yep. And then properties. Last one. Yep. And then it'll see if it's 32-bit. Okay, 32-bit. Okay. So we want
right here.
Let's do that one. Let's do Express and Tools right there. Yeah. Let's do that one. And do next. And that should download. Okay. So get that one going, and then go to the Empower info site, the main kind of the older kind of information site. Should be like /info, I think, in that. Whoop.
Did you have any other pluses from prior?
And then in there,
There's like the PDF of like how to install.
the installation page.
Really?
Yeah, it's gonna have like a super detailed.
Maybe that's why the other one wasn't right. Maybe I didn't follow it.
I did
well
use
enough.
Visual Studio.
And it may be slightly different to the other ones, but if you try to follow those close, you should get it installed. There's once that loads, if you go down about halfway, it'll say SQL Server, and it'll say installation instructions. Like you go down a little bit. Right here, click on that right there. That's gonna be a PDF, and that'll be like your total walkthrough.
Okay, cool.
Of how to install it.
Thank you.
Like everything, right? Every install.
I think
Did you get it going?
I probably have to delete a bunch of things, honestly. This is saying,
Thank you, Microsoft.
Yeah. I was like, no. There's your installation run.
okay, yeah, that's what it's on. I'm assuming it's a space thing.
What version? Can you go to that like your start button?
Yeah.
And do right click on the computer number. We should be able to do 1,000. What is it complaining about? Yeah, close out of that.
It could be the space.
How much space do you have left?
What's the quickest way to check that?
Computer.
Yeah.
And then just. Nah, you
I
got
just
19
deleted,
gigs.
some Adobe stuff.
You got 19 gigs for that. Plenty space. Like SQL Server won't take up more than like one maybe. So you should be good.
I might have to restart because I deleted it.
Click on that link right there. Let's just see what it's complaining about. Alright. Should tell me like what there's my hardware and software frameworks like that. So .NET framework. You should have gotten that. You installed like Visual Studio and all those in the list at some point. That should have installed the .NET framework for you.
Let's see. I have all that here. So.
Did you make it?
If you installed all that stuff, you should be good.
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. It's probably complaining about .NET Framework then. You do .NET Framework 3.5. You Google for that. Download, install that. That might be what it's missing.
Okay.
Just Google .NET, the period net framework 3.5.
If I remember.
Yep, that's it. First one.
Okay.
That may be what it needs. What else does 2014 need besides .NET Framework, like as far as a requirement? Because it's popping up and just saying you don't meet the requirements. And it's like she's got enough space, enough RAM, good operating system, whatever. And it's like
I had that going on too, which is why I had to push to get 10, and then I was like, yeah, I don't even really want 10, but here we are.
Oh, you upgraded from 7 to 2. Well, in 2017 for SQL Server 2017, that's true.
No, I know, but I followed the 14 instruction, and it just told me, nope, you can't do it.
Really?
Nothing.
I believe 14 won't run on Windows 7. That seems.
I don't know, I don't have any separate machines.
I tried.
Let's try.
I tried.
Let's try SQL Server 2012. Was that one?
12.
I don't think we have it on 32-bit.
They don't. SQL Server. Yeah, 2012 Express. There you go.
What does that?
That one. They should have 32 because before, like, the further back you go, the more.
It's okay for the beginners.
Yeah, x86 is 32-bit.
Okay.
So x86 is what?
Right. It's actually interpreting it.
I'm just thinking.
This one or?
That one. Sorry. Yeah. One up.
That.
I mean,
Yep, and hit next there.
If that number is-
That one should work. We're not in 2012, honestly. We're fine because we're not doing anything like super new. Like,
yeah, mine's been chilling right here for a minute. So this is
The install directions might diverge a little bit from the
Like,
installation instructions. You have,
but now it's not there.
If you get
I
like
remember, like that's the download took longer than I needed.
Sightsource.net/info. There'll be an installations page, and then I'll give you like a step-by-step.
So use the string of the common format.
Of installing everything?
Just SQL Server, just the SQL Server. Well, yes, everything, but we'll just, if you pop open the SQL Server instructions, it'll give you like a step-by-step of how to do this part.
It has to do with conversion, but it works.
And now, what's the syntax?
And you may have to hit OK out of this one to get that old installation.
Okay, so
One
zero
extra.
for cost.
All right.
That's it.
Windows. But the Express is supposed to have these things.
Oh, but you need a Service Pack. Service Pack 2 on Windows 7. I guarantee you that's what you need. It's looking for a Service Pack.
Service Pack 2 related is required for Windows 7.
Yep.
Service Pack 1 related is required.
Yep. You need a Service Pack just for your general Windows installation. That's what it is. Just do Windows 7 Service Pack 2. And unfortunately, that's going to take a while. So this is what I would do. I would just follow along for the next one. Go ahead and start downloading that and getting installed. 'Cause it's going to take like probably an hour. So just follow along on the next lecture, and then during lunch we'll make sure that you all get the stuff.
Should it be 2012?
Oh no, not SQL Server Service Pack, like Windows 7 Service Pack. Like your Windows installation needs that.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, which is going to take a while.
Cool.
Excellent.
Now, if I were to.
So Windows 7 Service
If I
Pack.
were to enter
Service Pack 2, yeah.
which one,
And it's probably gonna take a while to download, it's probably gonna take a long time to install, but once you get that, those other installations, even the 24/7 one, should be good shape.
And then by 13:59:59.
Where?
It would do 1 p.m. 59.
Are you on Windows 7?
So do you have to type it in?
I never got to that screen.
You don't have to, you do normal time. I usually do the,
Yeah, so I think it's probably different. This is also the 2014 version.
If the site is appropriate, I don't have it memorized.
I should have
But it will work. It's got a lot of conversion capability. I don't have all the conversion going. It's just my style, 24-hour time.
And then,
I think that you can get that right. It's a very large C++ base. Pretty much what you're work.
okay, see all these things, see all of these things. That are
And it actually supports milliseconds, so you can take a dot
all
and do 3 digits.
So, right,
That would give you the
let's do
most.
uninstall, do it for that whole
I
list.
think that's its maximum precision.
So then if I.
Yeah, there were other installations. It's okay. You'll have to get rid of all of those for it to, and then when you go to the install again, you'll be good to go. After, you have to make sure you get all of those out when installed, yeah. So what it does is
That particular
studio, you probably install Visual
more
Studio
advanced
first, and it puts in all this stuff, and then like, Google was like, no, I want to do that. So it's like fighting. So once you take all of those out, just the ones that say Visual C++, redistributed, yeah, so all those.
To do that.
And then once you do that, if you follow through the instructions again, just like you were doing, you should be good to go.
So you would use.
Yeah, we should have put the SQL Server installation above Visual Studio because that would have happened.
Create a brand new row,
Yeah.
read any set of rows, update a set, or delete a set. And when I say a set, the set could have one row. And then you do what you want.
Date? Yep, that's what you do.
Table name?
So, get date and
What table you want to operate on?
It's the function, yeah. So basically all that's saying is, hey, give me the current server name, which is on your machine, and as you're entering certain fields, here's the values I want to put in there. It's kind of like timestamp. It's like internet timestamp. There's also the UTC, if you want to put like a UTC universal. Usually daytime data in most production systems is stored as UTC. And then depending on like the user.
It's definitely a day, but we chill.
You'll get it out and it'll convert it for display.
There are
And it'll
days
save it. That way, all the data,
There's so much more
it's like most of the systems we build are actually used by people all over the world, so they're all kind of coming in
Yeah, if I
at
just
different
type
times.
the time, is it gonna get rid of the date?
It's like, you know, time, you know,
What
GMT.
I'm guessing,
And how we're like minus
I'm
five.
guessing here, is
Like
it
we're
January 1st,
EST is like, UTC minus five, that's
my
5
guess.
hours. We're 5 hours away
I'm
from
going to be
Greenwich,
more explicit.
UK,
And
which
say
is
the whole.
which is like universal, like zero time frame thing. You know?
Go, SQL,
So
go.
UTC basically just means Greenwich Mean Time. Yep, oh, nice, you got it.
Yeah, that's right. When I start
So that looks
new table,
good.
do like table 5, 6, 7.
Pop that open, pop that.
Table?
Yep.
Yeah.
So then you right click on tables, just right click, like on the actual tables folder, and then just say,
I got two.
table.
So what separates?
And then this is where you start putting in your columns, like the ones that were in Slack. It's like create a first name, last name, like that kind of thing.
It says I have to download Service Pack 1 first.
Okay.
I'm not sure what downloads means.
I don't either. Do you have Windows Update turned on? Because like if you have Windows Update turned on, it should just like download all that stuff.
You leave off the timestamp, but it was just midnight.
Yeah, do that second one.
And I just use the equals.
Yeah, turn on.
That should work.
So, just to warn you, when you turn that on, like the whole rest of the day, you're gonna be like downloading stuff, and it'll do Service Pack 1, it'll do Service Pack 2, like that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So the good news is, when you get those
you get it
Service
right.
Packs, your system will be much more protected than it was
Oh,
before.
did it?
Like you were probably really vulnerable to attacks and stuff without that.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. Yep.
That's embarrassing.
No, it's fine. Like that's one of those things that if you don't know it's off, you don't know it's off. You know, and it is kind of a pain. That's the thing that'll be like, hey, I'm gonna restart your system for you in 2 minutes, and you're like, what? And it downloads something it wants to install on there. But it is good. It'll keep you like up to date and patched and everything. And that's what those the other installations. That's what it was complaining about. It was like, oh, I don't have. I require the latest service pack in there. So who do you get after that?
That's interesting. Never got to this page that they told me that I was going to. Here we go.
Very cool. I didn't even know that was there. How do I get to? Yes. All right, so you got your table where you like it?
Yeah.
All right, so when you hit save, that should save your table out there. And then when you refresh, you right click on the tables on the left hand side.
Telling me I have,
Yeah, if you right click on that.
telling me I have it open, so I can't show you because.
There you go, boom.
Yeah.
You got your customers in there.
So I need to re-download it, I guess.
So now you got your customers, so you can kind of
I
bail
guess
out
I had the
this-
wrong
this
one, but now I
thing
have no
that
space
works
because I guess I want to download
Yep.
them. They're
You can
key.
bail out of that tab. And so now, now you create a new query. And then you can start playing with it. So select star from customers, right? Like, you know, kind of what he was doing before, where it's like, select to kind of see, select start from customers, and it's gonna be empty, so it'll show you anything like from. Select start from. Just like whatever.
Icon, am I on?
We made it. So there you go. So it's empty. And so now it's like insert, insert some stuff. And if you beyond like the notes you're taking, which is awesome. Definitely give yourself like what's going on. But the best way to Google stuff is T-SQL plus the thing. T-SQL is like, so SQL is the language that we're learning. T-SQL is like the SQL Server flavor of that. So there's something called ANSI SQL, which is like the standard set that like all databases use. And then every database like has their own little, like that get UTC date and all these little functions. Like each database will have their own little like kind of flavor.
I mean, I only put
things. But
with the virtual box, you only delegate so much of what is on your actual computer onto the. So it's like saying this computer can have this much of what's on my Mac.
So T-SQL is like the SQL Server.
So let's see if I
Microsoft
have
SQL
here,
Server.
like, that's Windows 7.
So all these functions that you show.
No, like here's the virtual box, and it's like
get UTC date or whatever.
size that delegated to specific device.
A lot of things like average and sum, some of that
Program.
across, which is nice.
So I think that was supposed to be enough to base out on the thing. I think the problem is
I can do MySQL, I can do Postgres.
SQL takes
like it
so
works
much of it.
everywhere. You know what I mean? So you go to a brand new database,
I
you
need to
never
uninstall the one I
looked at
have.
before. You can get data out of it, update it, whatever. The core stuff works the same.
Yeah. If I have too many screens up here, but on the job I'll have one.
Yeah, because
New database. We're doing it. We're SQLing.
Yes. Yeah, and you
Database name.
So I just want to make a quick point. A lot of what Derek has been showing is like what's considered ANSI SQL, kind of standard SQL.
Yes.
So like selects and inserts and updates and kind of the where clause and things like that. A lot of that's going to be common. So the cool thing is when you learn that, you're learning it in the context of SQL Server right now. That's going to work on Oracle. That's going to work on MySQL. That's going to work on Postgres. Some of the other functions he's been showing, like get UTC date, and some of the things that are kind of pink, that show up in pink, the functions, those are going to be different on different database platforms. Like they'll have their own little flavors of, different ways of doing it. Usually you can kind of get the same thing done, but the function might be called something different. So like that is null function he was showing is called like if null on MySQL or something. It's slight little differences. But just know that the core of what you're learning is very transferable to different databases.
Harper, at some point we need to resume. We need to resume. Do we need to synchronize with the others?
Yeah, let me give him if you're ready to roll again.
I think so. We have quite a bit to cover.
Okay. let me give him like a 2-minute warning.
Yeah.
And you can go ahead and start the stream back up.
I never stopped it.
Oh, okay.
I hope that's good.
Yep, that'll work.
2 hours and 11 minutes.
Yep.
So I'm trying to delete the wrong SQL that I had that I created for. Let's see, have something up. Like, see, this one's
I don't think you'll need to delete that one out. I think you can just add a new one.
I think I didn't put enough space when I made this virtual box to like have both of them.
You can, anything that you've installed, if you've downloaded all the installations, anything that you've installed, you can go delete the installers for those programs. That'll free up a ton of space.
Right, because that's a lot of that stuff I'm using. I finally got the second running on Mac anyways.
So
yeah.
Did you create it?
Okay, I'll go
Yep,
for that.
All right, so extend.
All right, I gave them a 1 or 2 minute warning. So they're starting it back up.
Click table.
Did you click the streaming?
Here we are.
I never stopped it.
Okay. All right.
How do I name
We've
this?
been streaming the whole
Let
time.
it rock and roll. Yeah. Just
you
remind
gotta
me.
just
I'll
put
try to
your
remind you a
inputs
bunch
in.
to
And then after
actually
that, you can like
take
save
that back. Now that you're on like the internal private network, you won't need to kind of reset that. It's only if you're on the guest
Right.
one where you kind of have to
Right.
like log off and log back on. So you should be good the rest of the day. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you want me though just for video separation to turn it off for lunch?
In between exercises, hit stop stream because they will watch the segments later,
Yeah.
And so yeah, to break it up, it's probably
Right, because this is all
manageable
dead
chunks.
time on the video.
Yeah.
This was all dead time.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I got that.
Let me know when they're ready.
I think they're good. Let me get a confirmation from Ballant.
Yep. what do you type for a phone number?
Are you gonna go over kind of the exercise a little bit?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it myself, as if I had been given the task.
And your car, 50?
I was slightly off with what I told you to type, but I don't think, I mean, that's all just, it's pretty trivial differences.
Okay.
Just let me know when they're ready. I don't want to start early.
They said Allie wants to stream for a second.
Okay, do I need to stop then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop that.
Okay. So, we went really quick. Derek introduced you to not only how to create schema. Schema is the technical word that means structure.
Wait, they do want in, so they're...
I started stream.
So, he's firing it up now, sorry. I guess he didn't check his text immediately.
Let me know when they got it.
Okay.
Okay, so they on? RVA, give us a shout. Y'all good?
I was typing something.
Did you have you?
Yep.
Yeah. I hope they can hear me. If you can't hear
Yes,
me,
no,
okay.
they're good.
Y'all good? Okay. So, I got nothing open. I didn't follow the example, so let's do that again. And I'm going to show you a couple things in SQL Server Management Studio that probably tripped you up, because I've walked around and I've seen 3 or 4 people having the same problem. So how do you get to SQL Server Management Studio? You know, I have it down here and I've got it pinned to my taskbar. That's probably a good idea, because as a database web application developer, you're going to use that almost every day. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. If you don't have it pinned, well, how do you pin something in Windows? Once it's open, right-click, and you can say Pin to Taskbar, and it'll remember it. It'll be there even when you close it. So if you don't have it down there, you can go to the Start button in Microsoft SQL Server, and it'll start coming up. It's that one, SQL Server Management Studio. And Derek was already throwing acronyms at you in the first 10 minutes. SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, okay? SQL, Structured Query Language. And he's been doing this so long that it's like the back of his hand. He doesn't even realize he's doing it. So let's get back into it. Let me explain the architecture, because some of you are confused, like it's not working, and you installed it. Here's the architecture, and I'm not going to go through the very specifics. I'm not going to, you don't need to know it. But you do need to understand SQL Server Management Studio is a window to your database. Databases don't have user interfaces. Databases live in dark closets, and they crunch data. That's what they do. So how do you see the data? You have to have an application. This is just an application that somebody built, Microsoft in this case, that allows you to talk with your database and look at your database objects. So somebody built an API, Application Programmer Interface, and it's called SMO. We're not going to get into it, but you could actually write code to talk to your database to list the structure and that sort of thing. This is an application that application developers, database developers use to see, what does my database look like right now? Can I change that? That's what SQL Server Management Studio is. Can I write queries? That's what it does. The database itself doesn't care if you ever look at it. It's happy in that dark closet crunching numbers. That's all it ever does. So, where is that dark closet? We learned it on day 1. In Windows, where do things run that don't have a user interface? It has things in the registry, but where do you have things like a program that runs automatically when you turn on your computer? It's at the operating system level, but we learned 2 different places where things just run. There's one is the task scheduler, and one is something that runs all the time. It's called services. So services, I'm going to go over here, and when you installed SQL Server, and we've had some problems with installation, Richmond, you probably did too, because we hadn't actually tested our installation until now. So if you go down here in SQL Server, now, sorry, you can't see that. And Derek, I'm going to give the mic back to you in just a second. I need to just cover some issues that we're having. So, see these things down here? I've got several instances of SQL Server. an instance of SQL Server is the entire database intellectual property that does the magic of storing and allowing you to write queries against your databases. So one instance of SQL Server is a piece of software that knows how to manage databases. Not just one, you could have any number of databases. So SQL Server Management Studio is like a window to talk with SQL Server server software anywhere in the world. As a matter of fact, Chris had 2 other SQL Server servers defined out there in the cloud, and he already had it predetermined, and that's what this is right here, server name. Who do you want to connect to? The dot means my local computer. That's shorthand. I could actually type in the name of my computer. This is an instance name, S2017. So that's one complete copy of the server software. Okay, so I'm going to connect to it, and that's what it's called. How do I know? Because in services, notice I've also got version 2008 right there. And on other computers, I've got like 5 different instances, different versions of the SQL Server. So here, notice there's your server name. By the way, can I connect to more than one server at the same time? Sure. SQL Server Management Studio is just a window. This isn't actually crunching the numbers. What's crunching the numbers is your service. The thing that lives in the dark closet doesn't care if you connect to it ever. So 2008, if I did that, it's probably not going to be running. And it's going to say network or credentials problem, something like that. And it takes like 30 seconds because it tries and tries and tries, like maybe I'm doing it wrong, is what SQL Server Management Studio is thinking. No, you're doing it right. As a matter of fact, if I want it to run, SQL Server. Now, how do you know if it's running or not? You see that little running right there as a service? 2017 is running, 2008 is not. Oh, it finally failed. Okay, yeah. Network related instance, yeah. Okay, got it. Now I'm going to go over here, start it. Start my service. That means run. I flipped the switch on. That's all I did. Okay, now watch this. Bang, I can connect to it. So that, think about these things. They are things that live with or without you. SQL Server Management Studio is your window onto how to connect to them. So I'm going to disconnect that. Now, the challenge number 1 was create a database. Right-click on databases, new database. I'm going to do this really quick, and I want you to get up to this step because I know Derek's going to run forward now, but I want you to get to where we are. So I think he called it Alpha or Bravo, I think is, okay, Bravo. So I've created a new database, and he's doing through the user interface. Right-click here, and you could say Table. And over here, it's going to show up this. By the way, you see I don't have that little thing over here that takes up half your screen? That just, let's see.
You don't need it?
Object Explorer? Or, yeah, it's over here in Properties Explorer or something. That's the Properties window. The first thing I do is close that, because it's going to take away screen real estate, and this is my only editor. Don't take away my screen real estate. I just click that off. If you ever want it back, you can turn it back on. You can resize this. So let's do a very quick table. I'm just going to do first name, last name, because I want to get it back to him. First name. Data types are extremely important in databases. You are the one making the rules for yourself and all the developers that are ever going to touch your database. So before you add a name of a column, don't add spaces in your columns. I knew he was like, you know, I'm not going to tell you how to do that. Don't add spaces in your columns. Okay? I'll just tell you that. And if I see you do that, I'm going to make you change it. Because you're wasting other developers' keystrokes times 1,000. Okay? Don't make things difficult. Make it simple. Make it easy. So first name. Varchar. He went through this really quick. What does varchar mean?
Variable character.
Variable character. And what does this number mean? Maximum size. So first name, I'm just going to make mine 25. If somebody has a first name longer than 25, they're out of luck.
Just to confirm something, so varchar counts spaces if it's within the word and before the word, but not after it.
We'll see that in a minute. So the question was, what about spaces? Do spaces count? And are they significant space after the word? The answer is spaces matter, yes. I'm not going to allow nulls, but first name, last name, and I'm going to do, what is it, promotion? What's the name of the field?
Promo opt-in.
Promo opt-in.
They wanted 2 different phone numbers.
In fact, I'm not going to do all that. It's because, you know what? Those are just strings. And I'm going to show you, these are the different data types, because how you talk with a string is identical. First name, last name, same thing. I'm going to show you the differences for different data types, though. So promo opt-in, a Boolean, what we talked about in JavaScript, true or false. In SQL Server, they call it a bit. Bit because it only takes 1 bit to capture that information. It's either a 1 or a 0 in SQL Server. True or false? True is 1, false is 0. Not nullable. So, date. We talked about very, very briefly about dates. So, created on, created at. So, created at, that's a database parlance that means I'm really talking about a date time. I don't care just about the date. I care also about the hour, minute, second of when that happened. If you care about just the date, database parlance is created on, okay? Just used to, you know, it helps other developers like, okay, that's a date, the other's a date time. So created on, let's make it date. There are at least 6, 7, 8 different date data types. If we take a look at this drop-down list here, there's dates, there's date time, and then some important ones that they don't even list here because it's not alphabetical order. Small date time, small int. You know, there's a tiny int down here. Isn't that cute? Tiny int. All these things mean this is how big the field can be for different data types. I'm sure he's going to go over that. We'll go over it in the next couple days. These are the things you do need to remember. You need to understand what are the tools that I can use in a database. It's your data types. So created on, I don't care about the time, just date. The problem is, I'm going to save this. So when you save it, it says, what do you want to call your table? I'm going to say customer. You may say, well, should I make it plural? Should I make it singular? My preference is everything singular. Some people say everything plural. Just be consistent, whatever you want. So this tripped people up. It's like, I created my table. Where is it? He went over this very quickly. He said, SQL Server Management Studio doesn't automatically refresh. It's not that slick. You have to go over here to Tables, right-click, and choose Refresh. Magically, there's my table. Now, how do you know what's in your table? See that little plus sign? Plus sign, columns. There you go. Okay? So I'm going to, this is your one editor, new query. Okay? So it gives you a blank window. And if you can't tell, Derek, I'm trying to go really fast so I can give it back to you. So how do we add data? How do we query data? He put 2 queries in the same screen, and I think it confused a lot of people. How do you get data back? The read.
Select.
Okay? By the way, let me show you a little trick that he's probably about to teach you anyway. Drag and drop your table name. Bang. It's going to put it over there for you. You don't have to type that stuff. How do you run it? F5 or push the execute button. Okay? There's nothing in there. Now, he put the insert statement right here next to the select. That confused a lot of people. They're completely different statements. You cannot even run them together. SQL is very simple, one statement at a time. So just to keep it separate, I clicked on New Query, and I'm going to say Insert Into. Now, do I have to type out all my column names? He taught you a way that you should never use. Insert into customer, and you just say values. Which column goes first? What's the order? You have no clue. And all the developers coming behind you have no clue. Never do that. Do this. You don't have to type them out. Use SQL Server Management Studio. Drag and drop the columns folder, and it'll write all your columns there for you in sequence. Okay? Values, first name, last name. You know JavaScript now. It's kind of like a parallel array. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one is going to be Ali, first name. Second one's last name. You see how this is working? Prompt opt-in. What data type is that? It's a bit. So there are only 2 valid values, 1 or 0. I'm going to opt in, 1. There's no single quotes there. It's not a string. Created on. There's no easy way to tell a database about a date data type or a date time. So what they do is you treat it like a string. You pass it like a string, and it figures it out. So I'm going to put single quotes around this, And there's a standard ANSI standard syntax for dates that work pretty much on every database platform. I want you to use that from now on. I did it. SQL Server is very forgiving. You can do this. It'll figure it out. Don't do that to MySQL. Okay? It's not going to work on other database platforms.
He means his, not MySQL.
Oh, yeah. Both. Yeah, not my possessive SQL. So this is the format that databases will understand. 2018, so YYYY hyphen month hyphen day. Okay? If I had hour, minute, second, I could do that. Hour, colon, minute, colon, second. That's all it is. It took me like 2 weeks when I first learned databases, like, how do I put a date time into my database? It's just a string. Treat it like a string in a certain format, and the database figures it out, okay? I promised Derek I'm going to get back to you in just a second. So I'm going to press F5 3 times, several times, okay? I added a record. This is immediate gratification. It added a record every time I pushed F5. It's not going to ask any questions. It's not friendly. It's going to do whatever you tell it to do immediately. That's good and bad. He already told you know about when to use your where clauses when you're deleting a bunch of records. So, insert, done that. I executed it multiple times. I'm going to do select now. I've got a bunch of records. Okay? So far, we're good. Now, what happens if I go back? This is another thing that tripped people up, and I promise this is the last thing, Derek. So I'm going to go and I'm going to change my table. Right-click, choose Design, and you get right back to where you were when you created your table. Okay? And I'm going to say, what was it, a phone number? Primary phone number or something? Varchar 30, whatever. Make it nullable. Okay, so I'm going to say save, and you probably all got, I didn't get an error message, but a lot of you are getting an error message that says, I can't drop the data. Actually, I probably have to make it not nullable. Yeah, it says, okay, I can't save changes because you require the table to be dropped and recreated. This is SQL Server Management Studio trying to take care of you. Leave me alone, okay? We know what we're doing. Tools, options. This is how you turn that off and say, leave me alone. Tools, options, designers, uncheck this box. Prevent saving changes. No, get out of my way. Now we're going to say save. And it says, okay, now it's a real error message. It says, cannot insert null into the column primary phone number. That's valid. But now it's not SQL Server Management Studio. That's our database saying, you're doing something wrong. That's all I wanted to show you, how to turn that switch off, because you turn it off once in SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. You see why we have the acronym now? SQL Server Management Studio is too long. You save it, and it'll remember it for all time until you uncheck it. Okay? That's all. Any quick questions before we turn it back over to Derek? Integers. If I had an integer, I'd pass it just like a bit. Except I could put whatever number I wanted in there.
If varchar covers both integers and...
The question was, varchar, you can put, like if I had 20, I think was the age, you can do that. That's not good. The reason being is because I have to get into how things are stored on disk and where things go when you save them. Long story short, if you say, like Tahbaz here, that's 6 characters. If I pass that, it's always going to be 2 characters, sometimes worse than that if you have Unicode. If you have a number, store it as a number. Take that away right now. And I'll explain in a couple days, or Derek's going to explain in a couple days why. Use the appropriate data types, because that allows the database management system, DBMS, another acronym for you, to store things as tiny and as efficiently on disk as possible. If you use the inappropriate data type, if you throw a number into a string, you're tying its hands. You're putting handcuffs on it, and you're not going to have good performance. We'll explain why later. But yeah, if it's an integer, pass it like that. Just the number. Single quotes are used to delimit strings or dates. Okay? Now, I'm sure Derek's going to go over the different data types. Like I told you, there are 6 different types, at least. I'm not going to get into that. Any other questions real quick from Richmond or Winston-Salem?
What did you uncheck again? Did you get rid of that prompt?
Let's get rid of the prompt. It's tools, options, designers, and uncheck prevent saving changes that require table recreation. Very specific and very annoying. Why do they do that? Because if you're connected to, remember, this is just a window on a database. If you happen to connect to a real live production database and you didn't have that checked the way it was, you change the default, and you make a change to a table, what really is going to happen is, say people are using your application, they're querying, say, our voting API, you do that, the entire table goes away. The application crashes, and then a second later it comes back because you just ran a script. All we're doing in SQL Server Management Studio is generating a script that drops the entire table, puts it into a temporary table, changes it, and inserts all those records back for you. There's no magic here. We'll learn how to do that later. But if you did that in production, all your users are going to start calling immediately. It's like, what did you do to my application? It's like, oh, nothing happened. Try it again. And it'll work. But it was down because the table didn't exist for a split second. Okay, so we have no users on this. This is only for your own purposes. This is on your local laptop, so we don't have to worry about that, which is why we can uncheck that. Anything else? Okay. Apologize, Derek. We just had to clear up some questions. It's all yours.
Harper, do you need to confirm if I'm transmitting well, or do you want to move forward optimistically?
Let me just double check. Get the screen going.
It looks good.
You pushing streaming?
It looks good, yep.
Okay.
Got it. In fact, I can see myself a little bit better here.
Let's see what's in here. Yeah.
Let me know when to go.
All right, you got it.
All good.
Call.
Cool. Doing an audio check. All right, good. Thank you, Ali. We actually ran into some of those things here, and I apologize for not covering a couple of those things ahead of time. I'm glad we got that warn thing. I actually just checked my machine. I'd already unchecked it at some point and just forgot to tell everybody. We did have a cool question. Ali touched on it. Multiple people here in Richmond tried to insert very large phone numbers, like that had area codes and country codes, and their data type was int because we couldn't fit that. One of the things to sort of note, there are some common data types in the world that you're going to encounter often in multiple languages. So one of the more common ones is a 32-bit integer. In fact, it's a 32-bit signed integer. It can hold about 4.5 billion values, but it's got, since it's signed and it can go plus or minus, positive numbers, negative numbers, it caps out at 2.23 billion and some change. So if many people here tried to use integer, which is great, right? We're using a small data type to store a number, but it doesn't store any number. It has a cap on how much data. So we changed those to big ints, and those started working. And some people also just stripped off the area code just to sort of quickly make sure that their query ran. So fully agree with Ali. We're always trying as DBAs to get the data types small and efficient and as accurate as possible. The tiny int you saw there was equivalent to a byte, so it's 0 to 255. It's an unsigned int. If you're 100% sure your data is never going to be bigger than that number, not even close to it, then you can use a byte. So we can be really efficient with that stuff. So we're gonna move a little bit. So my original goal was to go through the exercise a little bit myself, but we're coming close to lunchtime, and I don't want people to be starving because they stop listening when they're starving. So I'm going to quickly move on to the next topic, a very short topic on keys. We had a couple people run their insert statements multiple times and get duplicate records. Some of them were identical duplicates. So I'm going to run through that scenario right now. I'll do it in a brand new database. And then we'll talk about how we, as DBAs, fix that. So I have a new database, Charlie. You can go ahead and follow along. I'm going to be going through this pretty quickly because we're limited time before lunch. If you get lost, that's fine. You can just watch. It won't be a big deal. So I'm going to recreate our scenario. I'll do first name and last name, obviously we're doing char strings, and I'm just going to do a simple version of our data table here. I'm just going to do first name and last name. We'll save it. I'll use singular since Ali prefers that, no problem. You'll notice Harper and I were giggling. Everywhere I've worked, they have a different opinion. Some people do plural, some people do singular. My advice to you is to fall in line. What everybody else is doing, just do it on that project. Do whatever you want in your own private projects. So I'll use singular from now on. So I'm going to do an insert. And because he showed you, I will include the column names. I am typing them. That's just my habit. I apologize for not dragging and dropping. We'll do a couple. We'll do a Bob, and we'll do Smith. So I'm going to run it twice, and we'll look at our data set after the fact. So I've inserted 2 of them, but it's actually possible for there to be 2 Bob Smiths in the world, right? So although it's duplicate data, we can't tell them apart. Like, we don't know which, you could probably infer which one came in first, but they're identical. And that causes a lot of problems. So one of the things that we do in real databases is we use keys. We use unique identifiers of some sort, something that is unique within that data table that causes the duplicates to be non-duplicate. We do this for many reasons. It's not just for duplication. There's many reasons to use keys. So I've illustrated the problem here. Which Bob Smith is which one? If you're writing an application on top of this, you don't know which one is which. So what I'm actually going to do is, I think I'll just, let's see if this works. I don't remember if this works. I'm going to put in customer ID as a primary column. I'm going to give it an int. This may or may not work. I might have to do it manually. I clicked on this key icon. It's very tiny in the top right. That makes it a primary key. You'll be hearing the word primary key forever if you're a DBA. It's a common term. It just becomes as common as the word it. We talk about that all the time. I'm also going to go down in the properties for that first column. Make sure you have the first column selected. Identity specification, yes, and it defaults to 1-1. I'm going to see if this saves. I don't remember if it does. It does backwards fix it. So I did a couple things there. I created what's called a primary key. People also call it a clustering key in SQL Server. We use these fancy terms. All we mean by that is we do have a new column. It is of type int. And under the hood, there's some magic going on that I'm not going to have time to explain, but it allows us to seek to the correct record quickly. When you do a select statement, and in your where clause you supply a primary key, that is the fastest kind of single record lookup that you can do in SQL Server. We've been using where clauses already this morning, right? But under the hood, it's actually been running them inefficiently. But we have 2, 3, 4 records, doesn't matter. But if we had 1 billion or 1 trillion, that really becomes slow. But with a primary key, instead of searching the first name, which actually requires the database to go through every record and find Bob, when we use a primary key, it just goes to the one record immediately. It uses some fancy terminology that's computer sciencey, and I'm going to leave all those terms out of the presentation day. So that's what making a primary key is. It allows it to be the single, unique, it guarantees uniqueness, fast lookup mechanism that we have. And we just decided the type was int because we probably won't have more than 2 billion customers in this fake database. So that's what the key means when I click that at the top right. But when I went to this column properties and did identity specification, I was doing something else. I wanted another feature added to this column. And as you can kind of see what it does here. Identity seed, identity increment. It will auto-create these IDs for us, and it will increment them by 1. And it's guaranteed to be done atomically, which means all in one fell swoop. We won't have any duplicates, and all done by the database. We don't have to specify those. So if I go back to my select statement, we still have the duplicate Bob Smiths, but now they're no longer duplicate records. Right? They're actually, for real, unique. So even though it's definitely possible to have these 2 duplicates in there, they are effectively unique. And in fact, if you're wondering, can I break it? The answer is no. So all I did, and I went off the screen here, so let me bring it in. It's just a little bit easier to see. When I tried to manually in my query jam in that primary key, it said no. And it gave us a big red message with blah, blah, blah. You see the word identity insert. You can see that it doesn't allow this. So this is a way to have the database safely have an identifier. It's guaranteed unique. The lookups are very quick, and it actually sorts them on the disk in a given order. I won't be talking about this too much, I don't think, in any of my 3 days here, but for queries that do spans of records, so IDs 1000 through 2000, they're stored in order. If you think about it, the database can intelligently pick the correct records very efficiently. So you're always going to have a primary key. I didn't show you that this morning up till now, right, because we're just learning the basics of what's a query window. But what you'll find is in any real professional product, every table's got a key. It's usually one column, usually identity, but not always. There will be some places that do their own key generation, and there are some that will do what's called composite keys, where they span multiple columns. But the vast majority of the time, you'll have what we have here. And if you expand the table definition on the left, you'll even notice when we expand the columns for customer, it even has a special icon there that's a little orange key. That's how special it is. Primary keys are very special, and they give us this functionality. Look at my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I will insert one more record without forcing this in, just to show you. You'll probably be able to guess what the next record will be. I will change the name just because I can. Inserts that. You'll notice I'm only inserting the first and last name, but if I go to look at the database, it inserted it as a number 3. And it always increments those. So, oops. I will delete the one we just added. So delete customer, where customer ID equals 3. That's the one we just added. It's giving me the red squigglies because I didn't do the this IntelliSense update, which I'll do just to make it pretty. But you'll notice one row affected. So if we go back to look at what's in there, Alice is gone. Now let's add her back. So I'm going to go to that insert statement and immediately add her back. One row affected. We look at the data. What I want you to notice is what her ID is going to be. It's not 3. 3 has already been consumed. So the database is very good about incrementing these, and even if you delete, it just keeps going ahead of what it did before. That's why they have those terms like seed and those other, it's maintaining under the hood what its baseline number is. If you think about this, this is super smart, because this is a new record we added. This might be a different Alice Smith. Any sort of associated data or queries that used to need an ID 3 would hit no records now. And that's what we want, because we inserted a brand new record. It looks the same, but the keys are always incrementing forever, essentially.
Can we see the query where you inserted that?
Sure. This is the insert. That's what was requested. So I just I basically inserted her once, deleted her, inserted her again, and I'm showing that she initially had a value of 3, now she has a value of 4. And I could even, I'll change it to a little bit of a different name. We'll put David back in there. He will be ID number 5. So 1, 2, 4, 5. We've skipped number 3. Right, and this is all being guaranteed by the database. That's the real power here, is you actually, there are some technical advanced ways to jam in the numbers, but not in any natural way. So even if the app developers try to push it in, generate their own IDs, if you don't want them to as a DBA, you can actually prevent that, which is what it does by default. All right, any question about clustered keys or identity increment, which are the 2 features I just showed? Anything from Winston-Salem?
They just said, can you show the primary key steps one more time?
How to create it?
Said that, yeah. I guess
Sure.
where to set it up. Or just maybe go with the table definition just to show it.
Yeah, let me go ahead and clean up some of my, keep that one. So the key thing, sorry for the pun, I didn't mean that. You need to select the column, that's going to be the key. In this case, I'd added it in, but it's on there already. You'll notice it has an icon, but at the very top right here, and it'll be somewhere at the top here, there's a little key icon. It was originally unselected and I clicked it. There may be a way to actually do it here in the properties, but that's not my usual way. There's usually more than one way to do something. That's what makes it a key. That gives it the uniqueness and orders it on the drive and makes it very efficient at lookups. If you do select star from customers, where customer ID equals 5, we're going to get David because he's ID 5. What you might not appreciate is, unlike everything else I've shown you this morning with where clauses, it would have had to gone through all 4 records until it hit a match, but not here. This one actually did, they called it clustered index seek. It's a big technical term for it went directly to the record and pulled the one record out and never looked at the other 3. And so if this were a very tall table, meaning lots of rows, this would be really efficient. In fact, on really big systems, there's usually either a spoken rule or an unspoken rule that you operate usually on primary keys, almost exclusively in the product. For the main operations for the customer. You as a DBA might do a lot of set-based stuff, but most lookups, you want to try to get them as efficient as possible. And these are really efficient when written this way. So that's how we made it a key. And once again, with it still highlighted in the column properties, I went down to identity specification. It originally said no, I changed it to yes, and I left the values default, the increment and the seed. Rarely does anybody change those values. It pretty much right there, it's saying we're going to start at 1 or we're going to increment by 1. So there are no values of 0, and it will increment all the way up to the maximum of an integer, which is 2 billion, a little over 2 billion. Was that it for questions there?
If you're going to have something, if you're going to have more than 2 billion rows, what might you do?
What was the question?
If you're going to have more than 2 billion rows, what might you do?
Oh, you could easily change the data type to a big int, which is a 64-bit integer, and I think that's 10 to the 38th.
It's like some insane,
yeah.
Some insanely large
It's
number.
like the number of atoms in all humans and alive. Like it's some huge number. In some places, out of concern, if they are going to go global, there's 7 billion people on Earth, they might say go ahead and make them big ints, and that's still not bad. It's still just 8 bytes versus 4. That's still pretty darn efficient. And the incrementing works the same way. All the incrementing is still going to increment by 1 up to 10 to the 38th. My next topic is actually pretty long. I think my preference would be to do lunch 10 minutes early, because otherwise I'm going to span way into closer to 1.
Let's do that. Yeah.
All right. Then if there's any questions, please ask them now. Otherwise, I think we're going to do our break.
Yeah, and during lunch, if anybody's still having trouble getting either SQL Server installed or connecting or whatever, just let us know. We'll kind of help out with that.
Sounds good.
And so our lunch break, meet back up here at 12:50, and we'll continue on.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Just make sure.